Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Knicks Cast YouTube channel. Tonight, we've got a loaded panel, and we'll be breaking down the Knicks 2024-2025 season in all sorts, but also previewing what is a pretty much a very interesting offseason coming up. I'll start with Donald, who called a lot of games with us, obviously for the playoffs. Then we'll go to Dylan, who also helped us with the playoffs, and then Man Cave for the first time in about a year, I would say, is back on this channel. He and I and Coach Ed were calling games last year for the Pacers series in the semifinals. But Donald, first thoughts, man.
Well, great to be on again, and salute to everyone in the chat. Watching, hit the like button, hit the sub up. Great to be on this panel with y'all. Dylan, we've worked together in the past, and good to meet you, Spencer, as well. So I'm looking forward to maybe doing more in the future. So to be honest, we have a lot to break down. This whole Tom Thibodeau thing is one thing. How do you make this roster click? Because it obviously doesn't click right now. We need to find the pieces that does make it click. That's another aspect. The coaching search. Did they do it right by Tibbs? There's a lot of stuff to break down, and just to start with, this Pacers team are really freaking good. They're really freaking good, but I'm not really surprised by how that series went after game one for us. Like for me, like I was emotionally tuned out after game one. I didn't really have much else to give because that broke me. That loss. It was one of the most. I think it's probably the worst. No, it is the worst loss in modern Knicks history. Anyway, no doubt about it. One of their worst playoff losses in their history. So it's it takes a lot to get over, to be honest. So after game six was done, I was kind of like, I wasn't even surprised. I was like, I think it was coming. So there was a problem. They think that they've addressed this problem. Now we have to see what happens next.
Absolutely, Dylan.
Yeah, what Donald said, this offseason is going to be interesting because obviously a lot of changes have already started to come. We already fired Tom Thibodeau. It's been about almost 2 weeks now, roughly, since he's been gone. And it seems like, the head coaching search is narrowed down to two candidates. Looks like it's going to be either Taylor Jenkins or Mike Brown at this point. It's going to be a whole different dynamic moving forward. And really, I think it was necessary because after what happened in the playoffs and stuff, they obviously fizzled out to the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, second year in a row now that they've lost to them in the playoffs. It needed to happen. A change needed to happen in some way, whether it was something on the roster or the head coach. The head coach had to be the sacrifice. I think it was the right decision. I think out of all things that needed to be changed and tweaked up, that was the biggest one because, we saw throughout the year with the Knicks that, they didn't really have chemistry. They didn't have the chemistry that you really would have wanted. It didn't also feel like that Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns really had enough synergy on the court. It felt like that they were just kind of just being out there, didn't really know how to play with each other. I don't think really the coach got them kind of able to play with each other. I don't think he did a good job of really scheming them together. I saw something that in the Eastern Conference Finals, Brunson and Towns assisted together on just 3 plays in the entire Eastern Conference Finals, which is like ridiculous considering that's your two best players. I understand that defensively, yes, those two are terrible defensively. They're cones, but at the same time, you have good defensive pieces around them. There's really no reason why the defense should have been as bad as it was. Yes, I get it. You have 2 bad defenders out there, but they're so good offensively. You feel like you really shouldn't notice the defensive struggles that much when you have OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and then eventually Mitchell Robinson was starting. When you have all 3 of them on the floor together, there's really no reason for defensive problems. And I think the scheme played a big part in that because Thibodeau never liked to give ball pressure to the ball handler. He liked to give him space. He always gave 3-point shooters space off of screens, playing the drop coverage and all that stuff. So I felt like something needed to change. Something was not working. I don't think Tom Thibodeau really had a great feel for the roster really whatsoever. It kind of just felt like he was throwing things out of thin air during the Eastern Conference Finals. So it didn't really feel like he had anything going his way. It didn't really seem like he knew what he was doing. So it was time to move on. I understand for a lot of people that's kind of like a unpopular decision. I will admit at one point throughout the year I was defending him, but then the playoffs made me do a 180 and I completely changed my opinion about him because I started to really see what the issues were and that they weren't being fixed. If they were being fixed, throughout the playoffs, or they were at least trying to, I would give Thibodeau a pass. But he was too stubborn. His strategy was too rigid. Nothing changed, and now he's gone. And I think it was the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot for this organization, got him to where we are right now. We're back in competitiveness and all that, but we want to take the next step. We want to be where the Pacers are right now, where the Thunder are right now, which is in the NBA Finals and possibly winning an NBA championship. We were never going to get there with Thibodeau. That's really all I got to say to start this off, though. I want to pass this off to Spencer.
All right, man. Thank you guys, man, for having me on, man. Luca, what's up, man? Good to be back on here. Donald, Dylan, man, good seeing you guys, man. Salute to the almighty panel. Salute to the chat, man. Yeah, man, this season, like I said, it started out a good season, but like I said, I knew it was going to be a challenge this year, especially with a lot of the trades being made early on in the season. It's going to be a new team, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know everybody look at Cleveland, Boston, OKC. Those teams played together for a while. Indy, they played together. This Knicks team was new. This wasn't the same team from last year that played in that playoffs, so changes was being made. But like I said, I've never been a Tom Thibodeau supporter and stuff. I like him as a coach. He's a good coach. He's not a great coach. And like I said, his old habits have caught up to him again, man. Like I said, the rotation and things like that, the adjustments on the fly. Like I said, in the beginning of the season, man, Brunson and Cat, they was clicking on those pick and rolls. All of a sudden, they stopped going to the pick and rolls because what teams started doing was putting a big man on Josh Hart since he wasn't shooting the ball, and putting a small guy on Towns. So that took away the pick and roll. So if I'm Tibbs, you should have got Josh Hart out of the starting lineup, put Deuce McBride or somebody else in there, to alleviate that. But he never did. He just went the whole season, and that took away a big part of your offense. And the thing with Tom Thibodeau is he doesn't run an offense. When you don't run an offense, you have to do pick and roll, or you got to pick up the tempo to get easy baskets and things like that, and be a running team. And the Knicks were never that. That was part of the biggest problem. And like that, and against Indiana, it got exposed because, like I said, they didn't run on offense. They don't run on offense. So it's easy to play ISO ball, to play defense on an ISO ball and stuff like that. It felt like Julius Randle was here all again. How the offense ran through Julius Randle, and that was it. That's what it felt like again. So, like I said, we just needed a new voice in the locker room and stuff like that. And I'm, sad to see Tibbs go, but hey, I'm glad because at the end of the day, like I said, we never was going to be like one of those teams with depth because he never really plays the bench. I mean, you could give him all the bench help he needs. He's still going to come up with an excuse or something like that and just play his loyal players. And you can't keep doing that. You running players into the ground. I mean, he was shortening the rotation in game 1 of the season. How do you shorten the rotation in game 1 of the season? You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. And it caught up to him. And like I said, looking at these finals, this is how we wanted to be, to play, play like teams like this. We got to pick up our tempo, man. The Knicks are one of the slowest teams in the NBA. We got to pick up the tempo. We got to get more high motor players. We got too many low motor guys on the team. That's our biggest problem. Too many low motor.
Great points made all around. I just want to say what's up to Jacob once again. He says, I'm curious to see if Dane Hurley's a favorite. I believe Ian Begley said, who's arguably the most tapped in with this coaching search, said basically the interest is vague. It's not a real possibility. Same thing said for about Jay Wright. But I was originally going to go into player wars, but like, nah, screw that. We're right in the Thibodeau conversation. I'll start with my thoughts originally, and then we'll shift it around the panel. It's not just what I want to do is I'm not just going to break down firing Tom Thibodeau because you obviously firing Tom Thibodeau, there was mixed reactions. The media was sounding off. There are people for some reason who don't even watch the Knicks sounding off. It was really interesting to see, but I'll obviously get into that, but it's also like the fallout. Do you see, and this was interesting because Schwinn from the Strickland podcast brought it up in one of his recent podcasts. Do you view Tom Thibodeau being fired and hiring a coach two separate entities, or do you view it together like, we must, get an improvement over Tom Thibodeau, or, you felt Tom Thibodeau was not the right guy? So I'll start real quick, and I'll say this. I was very mixed with Tom Thibodeau throughout his tenure. I wanted him hired, but he did a great job the first year with the Knicks. That team was never supposed to be a playoff team. Arguably the best thing that could have happened, like with just a regular coach, was a play-in team, and the Knicks made the 4th seed. Be it a lot of teams were injured, but Thibodeau willed the hell out of that team. Very much defensive players, Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, Nerlens Noel playing the best basketball of his career. Obviously, Julius Randle, most improved player. RJ Barrett ascending. That team made it to 4th seed. They ended up losing to Nate McMillan. Okay. Second year, Knicks get Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier. That's when things start to go downhill. Obi Toppin not utilized as much. We're seeing Alec Burks point guard minutes, which was, I think, took a lot of people's, or I should say, took years off people's lives seeing that happen. But that was Tibbs being stubborn, not trusting the young players, which continues to bite. Well, I should say continue to bite in the ass a little bit. Size over, positionless basketball, essentially, and basically spacing. Third year, a lot of people wanted him fired after the 22-23 season or even before then, because I remember me and Donald were calling them Dallas Mavericks game December 3rd, 2022, and the Knicks got their ass whooped in the second half. And it was just horrible to watch. The Knicks were 10-13 at the time. The team didn't look like they were in sync. And apparently at that time, Leon Rose was the only guy that wanted to keep Tibbs. Everybody else, Brock Aller, William Wesley, were like, fired this guy. But Leon Rose stuck to him. The Knicks ended up making the playoffs. They eventually reached the second round, lost to the Heat. Okay, I was at that point, said, I don't know if Tibbs is going to win a championship, but I think he deserves to stay. Next year, you had the injured team in the playoffs because Bogdanovich was hurt, Robinson was hurt, OG was hurt, Randall was hurt. And I was like, wow, he really willed the hell out of this team to get to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semis. I was like, okay, there's a new refound hope in Thibodeau, which I didn't think I would have, but this year I wanted him gone, I'd say a little bit after midseason. And I felt, and Donald and I discussed this, I was like, you have to make a decision. You have to choose a direction. Either you keep Tibbs and you suit the roster to what he wants, or you fire Tibbs and you double down on this modern roster while making subtle changes. I'm happy the front office did that, and I'm happy they chose the direction that they did. Obviously, they have to hire a head coach, but I'll say this about the Thibodeau firing itself. It's not and Donald brought this up, and he and I spoke about this. This is not one you celebrate, like fuck Derek Fisher or fuck David Fizdale. This is like, okay, thank you for your work. You did your job. We don't believe you're the right guy moving forward, but nonetheless, thank you. We're going to move on to somebody who's more suited for what we want to do. That's how I feel at the end of the day. I think the Knicks made the right decision. On the coaching search itself, it's interesting because obviously they're talking to candidates who are not really possibilities. I should say teams, because Udoka interested, Kidd interested, Finch interested, all employed by other teams. Billy Donovan, same thing. And I think it's due diligence at the end of the day, but I think there's a somewhat theory behind that in which maybe the Knicks are playing some sort of media game, because we all know that Leon Rose is very quiet at times, and this might be one of those moments.
At times.
But overall, like, a lot of people are calling out the Knicks. Oh, they don't have a process. And like, there's two sides. There's two extremes. You have the people who say trust Leon Rose. He's done a great job. This, that, and the third. There's other people like, oh, the Knicks don't have a process. This, that, and the third. To me, you already started that process when you fired the head coach, and I think the Knicks should take a decent amount of time. I'm not saying you have to take the entire off season to hire a head coach. Obviously, you have free agency and different moves and stuff, but for the sake of the importance of this hire, they need to take a little bit of their time, because this coach that you decide you're telling them, you're the coach that's going to help us win our first Larry O'Brien, or at least try to, since 1973. That's not an aberration. That is a huge decision to make. And obviously, there are candidates like Mike Brown, Taylor Jenkins, and all this different stuff. But I'm going to shoot over to do Donald, because I know, he was originally a Tibbs fan. He was turned off in the playoffs. And then I'll go to Man Cave and go to Dylan. This is obviously reaction to Tibbs firing and the process of how everything is played out. That's how I want you guys to open up about it. Donald.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot to cover with this. So I'll be absolutely transparent. I've always been a big Thibodeau fan, but I've always known his limitations. He doesn't run an offense. I understand that. It's an ISO-based offense. However, we've seen what this team under Thibodeau was like with a roster that he can work with. And his best roster that he can work with was last season's roster. Well, there's one that's just been one before with Isaiah Hartenstein. He used a perfect player for Jalen Brunson because he set hard screens and they had a pick and roll partnership together, and he was a rim protector. Then you had Mitchell Robinson backing him up as well. So there was physicality at the 5. Julius Randle, bulldozer at the 4. That's exactly what Tom Thibodeau likes. ISO at the point. That's exactly what he likes. And then you had Dante DiVincenzo, who was the heart and soul of last year's team, along with Josh Hart in many ways, because they were just like the motor and of that team. They were just a constant motor. They were really physical, hard-nosed dudes. That is the type of team that Tibbs loves. And so when Leon Rose broke it up in order to make it a finesse roster, Thibodeau no longer was the right coach for this team. And that I stand by that. As soon as they made the trade for Karl Anthony Towns and acquired Mikal Bridges, those dudes are not Thibodeau type guys. They're just not. I mean, we know what Cat is like. He's a term zesty, but it's not a derogatory term. But he's a little different than what Thibodeau likes. He's not like a hard-nosed bulldog dude. And Mikal Bridges hates contact. He wants nothing to do with any contact whatsoever. He'll run away from contact. That is not a Thibodeau guy either. They've acquired finesse type guys, and Thibodeau is no longer the right coach for this type of roster. Now, if I had a preference, I would have continued to go along with a roster that suits Thibodeau's style, because you want to try and make the most out of what you got as your coach. You've just extended him, so you've just given him a 3-year deal. I thought there would be synergy between him and the front office, but clearly the synergy broke at whatever point as soon as they made the change to acquire Cat and Bridges. So he wasn't the right coach for this past season's roster at all. And then once we've learned about some of the problems that there was going on, I mean, hey, everyone here in this panel knows there was absolutely no cohesion on that roster. And it was crazy because every time that me and Luca called a game, the amount of times that we said to each other, what do they do in the film room? What do they do?
That's the same thing.
What do they do what do they do in their days off? Do they just go and chill in Central Park? What do they do? Because there's nothing that happens. It's like they don't work on anything. And just as I say that, Ian Begley had a really interesting point here. The Knicks didn't have full scrimmages during an entire training camp one season, which is uncommon. Players found it odd they didn't scrimmage during the camp. Thibodeau's Knicks didn't scrimmage often in the season. Players were also surprised that they didn't work on specific end-game situations during this past season, which is something that most teams do. Yeah, right? They found it strange that the coaches that none of the coaching staff went over situations during practice.
Wow,
that's a fireable offense. It doesn't say a whole hell of a lot for Rick Brunson either.
Right.
All right, but that kind of stuff is why there was clearly a divergence between Leon Rose and Thibodeau. They were tight at one point. They were very tight. And they were in lockstep. They were in synergy. What Tibbs wants, they got the kind of player that Tibbs liked. I think it was once Leon Rose was paying attention to the fact that they weren't working on anything. They weren't doing anything in practice. And then guys like Mikal Bridges is coming out saying, I mean, I'm tired here, man. You're playing me 45 minutes every single day. Why don't you expand the roster? Expand the. And apparently, again, Begley said that there was some pressure from up top for Thibodeau to look at expanding his rotation during the season. He refused, completely point blank refused. And then it was only once we were starting to look cooked against the Pacers that he was like, oh shit, maybe we should try something new. But those new things needed to be introduced months before. I've been saying it before. I always felt that Tyler Kolek could have been a really, really useful rotation piece. I always liked the minutes that he gave because he just got the guys in the right position and he fed them nicely. I know he has some flaws to his game, but he's a rookie, so he's a second-round pick. Of course, that's natural, but you got to develop him. But whenever he was on the floor, his assist-to-turnover ratio was beautiful, and that's the kind of stuff that would actually help. Bridges started to look good with him beside him, and like I was thinking, this guy could be a useful rotation piece. Thibodeau completely ignored him. Thibodeau ignored a lot of people off the bench until it was too late. So long story short, with regards to Thibodeau, is do I think he deserved to lose his job? No, because if you get to your conference finals for a first time in 25 years, I can't say you deserve to get fired. However, do I hate the fact he got fired? No, I don't. And that's why it sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. There is a difference between the two. Like, you can say he didn't deserve to get fired because no one can really deserve to be fired after getting to the next first conference finals in 25 years. But did he do a good job? No, he didn't. Thus, I can completely understand why they've moved on. I'm okay with it. So that's where I'm at with it. And will we regret it? I don't know. Because here's the thing with this coaching search. These names that we're being linked with, they're not 1,000,000% better than Tom Thibodeau in many ways. Like, it's not like I could think of, for instance, I don't understand why they're not interested in Malone. Like, he just won a championship. He's from New York. Like, but they really want nothing to do with him because they think that he's going to be another Tom Thibodeau 2.0. But, I mean, that's a tough sell considering what he did with Denver. I don't know why he's like radioactive right now. I would definitely interview him. But as for the two names that they're being linked with, I like both. I like what Brown did in Sacramento. And the Sacramento are complete morons for firing him. But they are a moronic organization. But they were looked actually competent with Brown, and that's the reason why De'Aaron Fox, I should say, he requested a trade because Brown got fired. He said, "I'm not going to work for another coach in Sacramento." So once they fired Brown, then he was like, "You know what? But trade me." So that's what they did. So it sounds like Brown is good with players, obviously, and he helps develop them. So I think he could work. I like the up-tempo offense he runs. That could be something that could be beneficial. Plus, he's not bad defensively either. I could get behind that. And I thought that Jenkins, I think the work that he's done in Memphis is fantastic. Like, I thought he did some great work in Memphis. And if I was to rank it, I'd probably give Jenkins the nod right now, probably, because I'm really impressed with the work that he did in Memphis. Do I know 100% that they're better coaches than Tom Thibodeau? No, I don't know that. But they're very good in their own right. I'm hoping that and it sounds crazy because I know I'm in the minority here, but I think Jason Kidd would work really well with the Knicks because it would mean instant buy-in with Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson loved working with Jason Kidd. And to be honest, this is a Jalen Brunson team, and I'd want his complete buy-in because, he can't be too happy with what happened with Thibodeau. He says Thibodeau was like his granddad, so it's going to be a tough one for him. I think Jason Kidd would be a really good coach for him to help get him back on track a little bit, to work under an unbelievable all-time great point guard. So I'm hoping that maybe they try and convince the Mavericks. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I think that it could work. That's just my opinion. Those are the three candidates I would pay attention to. And I do love Johnny Bryant too. But I think it's pretty clear that the Knicks are looking for experience. Thus, maybe Bryant's not the one, but it is a little surprising. The way I would have done this before I pass on to the rest of the panel, I think the way that the Knicks have conducted this coaching search is ass backwards. The first thing I would have done was interviewed the two guys we're going to interview next week. I would have done it first to start with before having all this leak that we're asking 5 or 6 guys that are already employed. I think it's a bad look. It looks unprepared. It looks like panicking. And even if that's not the case, that's exactly how it looks. And you don't want that kind of optics. You don't want to look like a clown organization, especially because you're getting clowned for firing Tom Thibodeau. You want to be smarter. So the first thing they should have done was interview the guys that were unemployed, and then you choose 1 or 2 guys that you like that are employed, and it doesn't look nearly as ridiculous as it has. Because I'd be perfectly honest, I think the way they conducted this coaching search looks in public is ridiculous. You can do all that stuff behind the scenes. You can work the phones behind the scenes without it being leaked in public and having Shams break it. Oh, they've contacted Billy Donovan. Why do we want Billy Donovan? No one wants Billy Donovan. Bills fans don't want Billy Donovan. So give me a break. So the way that they're handling this is ridiculous. It should have been done the other way around. I stand by that.
Yeah, man. It's kind of crazy because, Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau was lockstep together. Then all of a sudden in the offseason, they say they haven't talked in a year, which I found kind of odd because I think a lot of stuff broke down after the playoffs last year when Mitchell Robinson got hurt, because we thought Mitchell Robinson was going to be ready for the start of the season. But unbeknownst to us, he wasn't going to be. He was going to be out half the season. And that was the biggest problem. He wasn't going to be there. And then, what is the Hartenstein, his contract, we couldn't give him as much money as some other teams because of the Birds right thing or whatever it was. So CBA. So when he flew the coop, we had no center on the roster. Only Julius Randle was there. So I guess Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose panicked. Was like, oh, look, we have to get a center. We need a center. So that's why that trade was made with Randle. But it hurt us because DiVincenzo went in the trade too, because I really wanted DiVincenzo to stay, but he was required to be in the trade or else the trade wouldn't have been made. So, that was the first bad sign, coming into the season. And then with Thibodeau, I know he had Cat before in Minnesota. And I heard, we heard about Towns being traded to the Knicks like a year or 2 years ago and stuff like that. They always trying to get Cat, and we're just like, why are you trying to get Cat? So here Tibbs already had him. Tibbs know what the type of player he is. Then when they made the trade, so I'm like, okay, so this was probably a Tibbs thing that he wants this trade to be made. But come to find out, it's just like, no, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, here we are again, man. So it's just like these guys are not talking, and that threw everything off, man. And they just try to play it off during the season. But like I said, they still wasn't even talking during the season. We didn't even know that. That's not a good look. So I knew there was going to be some fight with Tom Thibodeau. Like I said, this was his job to save. Yes, he got to the Eastern Conference Final, but he had a talented team as well. It wasn't like he had a bad team. So they felt like if this team could get to the Eastern Conference Final and with a short bench and, things and no offense, they feel like they could get a coach that could probably do better than he could. That's how they looked at it, or that's why they're looking at it right now. And as far as the firing, this is the better time to do it because I'd rather Knicks get a new coach before the draft and free agency, even though we can't do too much of free agency because of, the money situation, the second apron and all that stuff. So I could see if they don't get a coach before then, but I would like for a coach to be in place so that way he knows what type of players he wants, so that way we don't hamstring him and give him some other players that he don't want and he just have to make do with what he has, So, and then going on to what, what he said, it would, so far as Tom Thibodeau is just like, hey, he's not going to change. He's never going to change. That's how Tibbs is going to be. That's how he's going to be. And I understand it. I don't understand it, but it is what it is. And like I said, I don't feel bad for him. Like I said, because he had 5 years. It wasn't like he had 1 or 2 years. He had 5 years. When he first came, they had a bad team, and he got them off and changed the culture, which is cool. But like I said, as time goes on, as players evolve and players get better, coaches got to get better too. And Tom, you had enough time to change your ways and things like that because what wasn't working for you in the past is still not going to work for you in the future, and he still don't want to do it. And like I said, because you look at the bench, the rookies that we picked, those guys could have played this year. They should have been playing. Haporti, what's that? Dadier. I think Dadier could play. And Cola could play. That could have been some depth right there, but he didn't want to play those guys because they're too young. They're not ready. I was like, at the end of the day, those guys play on any other team. They're ready. OKC, they'll play them. Indy will play them. Anybody will play them. They're ready. Let them play. So that was the thing. And I felt going forward, they just felt like, hey, he's going to keep doing the same thing next year. He's going to do the same thing. So they just like, let's cut ties with him and stuff like that. So It is what it is, man. As far as the coaching, like the names, Malone, Taylor Jenkins, yeah, I felt like they shouldn't even went after guys who are already on teams already, who's already under contract, because that sounds so silly to go after somebody who's under contract. I mean, of course, teams are going to refuse, to give interviews. I mean, that's stupid.
It is.
And like I said, Taylor Jenkins, Mike Brown. Mike Brown, the thing with Mike Brown, I like his the offense he ran in Sacramento, but I also felt like I think he got better as a coach because I felt when he got LeBron James, I think LeBron James was really the one that was carrying that team and all that stuff, and Mike Brown was just chilling on the sidelines, But after that firing, I guess he got better and he adjusted. So I could see what he did in Sacramento. That gave me a little bit of hope with Mike Brown and stuff like that. As far as Taylor Jenkins, he did a good job in Memphis with John Moran and that Memphis team because they were a good team. They were a good team, and actually they was in the playoff hunt, until he got fired. So it wasn't like he did a bad job and he did this disastrous job and got fired. So if they hire either one of them, I'm cool with them and stuff like that. Danny Hurley would be my choice if he wants to coach the Knicks, And Johnny Bryant, I like Johnny Bryant, but I think like he said, he's I think Knicks want an experienced coach or something like that. And the coaches, all these coaches that they're going after, nobody has won a championship. So they all in the Tom Thibodeau boat. They haven't won a championship. It'd be different if Rick Carlisle sitting out there. Frank Vogel's out there. I don't like Frank Vogel. Don't want that guy as a coach. And I know everybody's saying, some people say Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson been having a coach for 10 years, and I don't think he's ever going to get back in coaching anyway. So, I mean, that's a moot point, A name that was interesting that I said, and I know he never coached before, was Rajon Rondo. Even though it's like Rondo. It's like Rondo. I was like, but Rondo is one of the smartest players in NBA. So, I mean, but he'll never get a shot with that. And Sam Cassell, I hear the name of Sam Cassell sometimes. He's been an assistant forever in the day and stuff like that, and nobody's given a shot yet. But I don't know, man. I think it's gonna come down to Taylor Jenkins and Mike Brown now. And that's like the two coaches now because Jay Wright is not interested in the job. He's chilling. So which is fine, and then they keep talking about some of these coaches, even though they got denied, they might want to force their way out. I was like, I don't believe that. And another coach that did got a lot of offense.
I just want to ask you, do you think that they had a plan after they fired Thibodeau?
It don't look like that, which is crazy, right? Which is crazy. Because I thought they would have had a plan. If you're gonna do that, I thought they had a plan, had like a secret weapon like nobody knew about, like they were just gonna spring on, but it doesn't look that way. And another thing is Mike Budenholzer. I was like, I know his offense, he runs a lot of offense, but as far as defense is not there. But I don't know what's going on with him and stuff like that. But I don't know, man. Whatever coach, but I say Taylor Jenkins might be the best choice for right now.
Yeah,
I'll let Dylan go.
Yeah, and obviously that's a lot to unpack, but I actually have a completely different perspective on the head coaching search, and I want to explain why. So, you guys were both saying that you don't think it's a good look that they've been asking these other teams who have head coaches already under contract. I actually don't think it's a bad thing, and you know what? You want to know why? The Knicks are the only team with a vacancy right now. They're not competing with other teams for guys right now. They're the only ones. And what I would rather them do right now is, yes, I get it. Asking like championship teams for coaches looks dumb. I get it. But what I would rather them ask every single team what they feel about their head coach right now before they go ahead and hire someone that is unemployed and that the only possible team they can go to is the Knicks. And the reason I say that, because let's say the Knicks hire Mike Brown, for example, just throwing it out there, hypothetical. Let's say they hire Mike Brown, and then 1 week later, for whatever reason, Jason Kidd becomes available. But they didn't check in on the Mavericks because they were like, oh, well, he's under contract. We're not going to check in. Now, all of a sudden, he's available. And it's like, well, crap. We just hired Mike Brown, but we would have wanted Jason Kidd. But now we can't go get Jason Kidd because now we just hired this guy. I would much rather them ask every single team about their head coach right now. I would rather them even ask about Indiana, OKC, every single team. I don't care. Well, maybe not Doc Rivers. Don't ask Doc Rivers. I don't want to. But you get my point, though. Like, I would rather them ask about every single team and see how they feel about their head coach and see like if they, feel like that person is part of their long-term project before they go ahead and hire someone else because they're the only vacancy. If there were other teams out there that had vacancies, I get it. Maybe you want to be a little more urgent and go after guys that you can get. But the Knicks are the only team. There's no rush. The season just ended for them, and the NBA season is technically not even over. The NBA finals are still going on. They don't have to rush this process whatsoever. Yes, I would like to have a coach in line before the draft, but they don't have to rush it is my point here. They don't have to, have a head coach by tomorrow. They don't. As long as you have it by the draft, you'll have it. And, whatever it is, whoever it's going to be, at this point, we have no idea. But I think what the Knicks are doing by, asking these other teams is just due diligence. I don't think this is like a move of desperation or some sort of like no plan type strategy. I think the Knicks have a plan. I think the Knicks have guys lined up. I think they have an idea of who they want. And that's why they've already scheduled these interviews with Jenkins and Brown. They probably had their eyes locked in on them the whole time. But they wanted to see what these other teams felt about their coaches first before they went ahead and set up those interviews. Because, like I said, they're the only team that could set up an interview with Jenkins and Brown right now, at least at the NBA level. If those guys wanted to take a job in college or something, that's different. But at the NBA level, the Knicks are the only team that they can go at. So at the end of the day, I would much rather them do what they're doing right now. I think, if anything, this is the right process. And furthermore with that too, this is kind of how the head coaching search for most teams in the offseason goes. It goes like this. They do ask about other teams and stuff like that. It doesn't get reported like this.
Not 6 dudes, man.
I'm gonna explain. It doesn't get reported like this because nobody cares if like the Atlanta Hawks have a head coaching search and then they asked about like the Charlotte Hornets head coach. Nobody cares. But because the Knicks, they're in New York, team just made the Eastern Conference Finals, all that stuff. You know how people are with the Knicks and the media and stuff. They care. So the moment any of that intel comes out that the Knicks asked about X team about this coach or Y team about this coach, every reporter and every insider is going to do whatever they can to make sure that gets out. Because you know why? They want the Knicks to still be the league's punching bag. For 20 years or so, the Knicks were a laughingstock, and everyone in the media always made fun of the Knicks. It's just how it is. And I'm not even trying to sound like that, like a sore loser or anything like that. No, it's just a fact here. The Knicks were always made fun of throughout most of the 2000s. And therefore, when they have situations like this where they have an opportunity to be like, oh, look at the Knicks. They still don't have a head coach. Look at them. They look like they have no plan. Look at the media right now. The NBA Finals are going on right now. What have you heard more about in the national media? You've heard more about the Knicks. You have heard more about this head coaching search than the NBA Finals, which is alarming.
Running it badly.
It just tells you though that a lot less people care about like those small market teams and what they have going on. But when it comes to a team like the Knicks, where they play in New York, the mecca of basketball and all that stuff, everyone cares. And people from outside New York who don't like the Knicks have something that they can laugh at and be like, look at them. They have no coach. They have no plan. I think the Knicks have a plan. I think they do. Leon Rose has always been someone who doesn't like to reveal his plans. And furthermore, too, he cares a lot more about results than optics. The optics are not everything for him. If the results come, then that's all he cares about. He doesn't care that if to the rest of the world it looks like a sloppy process or it looks like an improper judgment or whatever you want to call it. He doesn't care about all that. He cares about the results. When he hired Tom Thibodeau, people did question if Tom Thibodeau was going to be a good guy for the Knicks because, of his fallouts in Chicago, his fallout in Minnesota, all that stuff. People did question that big time. And then he obviously the first year of Thibodeau was great, won Coach of the Year, made the playoffs, all that stuff. All of a sudden, people felt differently about the guy. And then the next year, the Knicks stunk. So then everyone said, fire Thibodeau right now, all this stuff. And then it goes right back and forth. It's been just an emotional roller coaster with Tom Thibodeau. There has been no consistency. Even I'll admit I was not consistent on my opinions about Tom Thibodeau because I was defending him for most of the year until the postseason. But I think I'm pretty firm right now that the decision they made to fire him was the 100% correct decision. I think we're all in lockstep on that part. But I think the process that they've done since then in terms of looking for a new head coach is the right way to go about it. Yes, I get it. To some, it may look stupid to ask like, oh, why are you asking the Minnesota Timberwolves about their head coach? Well, why not? Why not? What's the worst they can tell you? The worst they can tell you is, no, get out of here. Okay, hang up the phone and go on to the next guy. You're the only team with a vacancy right now. I would rather them ask about every single coach than not do that and go after someone that's unemployed and then you find out that a guy you could have gotten that's better becomes available a week later. And it gains intel too because and it sounds stupid to say like, oh, it just gains intel. It gains intel with these other teams because knowing how they feel about their head coach too, it could play a part in like trades or free agency or anything like that. It does play a factor into that because, if a team doesn't like their head coach and certain players want out because they still have their head coach, maybe you could find a trade You know, what if the Knicks, let's throw an example. Let's say that they, talked to Jason Kidd and the Mavericks said, no, we don't want you to interview Jason Kidd. Okay, fine. But let's say like PJ Washington doesn't like Jason Kidd because now he's about to lose his spot to Cooper Flagg. All of a sudden, now you know that he's a trade target now. Now you could be like, hey, maybe we could go after a trade for him. Obviously, that's, very much deep thinking, outside the box thinking, but it's something that you can consider because it's something you can really consider because, it's not just about the coach themselves too, because who knows? I would be willing to bet too that I'd be 99% willing to bet as well with this, that the Knicks probably knew that almost every single one of these coaches they've reached out to, they were going to get denied. They probably knew that before they even dialed the phone and called them up. They probably knew that they were not going to be able to interview them, and they would have been stunned if a team allowed them to interview them. But it can never hurt to try. Exactly. And it can never hurt, though, to try and do that when, for all the reasons I laid out before, you're the only vacancy. You're not fighting with other teams for a guy right now because you're the only vacancy. You might as well see what you can get, because who knows? What if, like, the Rockets, for whatever reason, did let us interview Ime Udoka? What if they did? All of a sudden, we could have Ime Udoka. We wouldn't have to worry about Taylor Jenkins or Mike Brown right away because, well, those guys are unemployed. No one's fighting for them. So we can save those guys for last, when we don't have the other options that we're trying to go for. There's really good coaches out there in the NBA, and there's obviously some guys that are not that great, but sometimes, too, it's not just about, like, their resume. Sometimes it's about how they fit with the roster. And, there's many guys, too, like Taylor Jenkins, for example. He could fit with this roster. I know a lot of people generally agree that he was pretty good in Memphis, but, I think a lot of people are unsure about if he can be a guy that can lead a team to a championship. But at the same time, you want someone who can actually kind of resonate with the players a little bit and have a feel for their roster. Tom Thibodeau did not have a feel for this roster this past year. As Donald said, and I do agree with this part, he did have a feel for the roster the year before in 2024 with DiVincenzo and Hartenstein and all that. He definitely had a feel for that roster. He knew what those guys excelled at. He knew what roles to play those guys in, and that's why they performed as well as they did. That's why a lot of guys on that team had career years. This year, he had no idea what to do. He didn't. And, you can give partial blame to, like, Leon Rose for overturning the roster in one offseason. But at the same time, I think we can agree that these are the types of win-now moves you want to make. You want to make moves to improve the roster drastically. You don't want to always have a slow building process, especially in a time right now where the Eastern Conference is weakening. The Eastern Conference is going to be trash next year. I'm just going to be honest. It's going to be terrible because the Celtics are not going to be as good. The Bucks aren't going to be as good. There's going to be a bunch of teams that are going to slip. The Knicks have a very good chance to be even the 1 seed in the East next year, and I think you need to take full advantage of that. You need to take full advantage, get the right head coach, make the right moves in trades or free agency, whatever you got to do to address the roster, and go at it. I fully trust Leon Rose. I fully trust his process because, 9 times out of 10, he's pressed the right buttons. I say 9 times out of 10 because, yes, like every GM and every president, there's that one botched move that they made, whatever. I think overall,
Bridges.
Yeah, like I think we can agree five first rounders and all those swaps, whatever, for Bridges was a mistake. But I don't think getting the player was the mistake, just the package at that. But that's besides the point. Looking ahead of, like, we'll further discuss like Bridges and stuff later on. But my point that I really want to make here is just I don't think what they're doing right now is a bad thing. I really don't. I've seen too many people on Twitter and on TV, all that stuff, say, "Oh, this is embarrassing for the Knicks. This is a bad look. They have no plan. They don't know what they're doing. They got to be some of the stupidest people on earth." I really don't think they are. I think they're actually doing this the correct way. I think what their process is the right way. I know we're all entitled to our own opinions, so, you two don't necessarily have to agree with me on that. But I firmly believe that what the Knicks are doing is the correct thing. I think that I would much rather them ask about these coaches, get turned away by these coaches. Heck, even have these teams block your number. I would rather them at least try and see what they feel about those coaches before they go ahead and hire someone that there's no competition for. Because
I want to jump in on a couple points.
Go ahead.
First of all,
go ahead.
It is a process, and they should be running a process. But the way you do it is you should be interviewing assistants that you like, that you're impressed by, that you've done intel on, that you've been impressed with the work that they've done on the bench on other teams. You should be doing that kind of work. You should be interviewing some of them as well. Because then that's how you build intel. That's how you build knowledge. Like, I like this guy. I'm going to keep him in my back burner for our next coaching search. Or if there's an assistant spot open, do you want to take the assistant spot? That's the kind of stuff you should be doing. Even if you're not intending to hire them to be the head coach, it's good to build up intel with assistants That's how they run. That's how the league runs coaching searches. It's not just calling every single employed head coach going, "Hey, you want to speak to me?" No, okay. No, what they should be doing is be like, "I really like your assistant. I'd like to speak to your assistant." You have these interviews with the assistants. You build up that intel, and then you speak to the unemployed head coaches as well. So you build up that intel. There is no rush.
And you know what? I do agree with that. That it should be, talking to assistants and all that stuff. I agree. And you know what?
There is no rush. You're 100% right. There is no rush.
And you know what? With the whole assistants thing, I bet you that they have assistants targeted already. I bet you they do. And they haven't really been made public because really, who cares that they are interested in the Atlanta Hawks assistant coach or something? I'm just throwing a team out there. Nobody cares. Until they become actually interviewed or they have a setup interview, it's not going to be reported in the news. Nobody cares, right? So, when it comes down to that, I bet you the Knicks have assistants lined up. I bet you that they have guys that they want to interview that are assistants on another team right now. They probably do. I highly doubt Taylor Jenkins and Mike Brown are the only two guys they ever wanted to interview. They probably want to interview more people. Who knows? Maybe they get blown away by Jenkins or Brown and they go ahead and hire them. But who knows? Maybe they bomb the interview and then they go after their next set of targets, which is probably these assistant coaches that they've been looking at. They've also been, I've heard they've been talking about the college route as well. It's not just like Jenkins and Brown are right now probably the top two candidates. I think everyone kind of knows that right now. But if they end up bombing the interviews, the Knicks don't like them or they're not impressed, or even if the Knicks are impressed but they still want to scout more options because they have the time and they have the time to do it, then I expect them to do that. And I also expect them to talk to some assistant coaches. I'm sure everyone's talking about Johnny Bryant. I'm sure they have something in the works for him if Brown and Jenkins don't work out. I'm sure they have stuff ready for certain other assistants out there as well. I highly doubt that they have a very short list. I'm sure their list is super long to the point where I can't even count every single name because, they probably are looking at everybody. And that proof that they're looking at everybody is by talking to the teams that have employed coaches. And yes, that process seems dumb to talk about someone who's employed, but who knows? What if that team was ready to let loose of him? What if they didn't want to sign him to an extension? What if they were ready to, take on additional draft comp to get to move off of him because they didn't want to sign him?
You're right to an extent. Like, for instance, I think Jason Kidd made a whole lot of sense because we know the situation in Dallas is very, very tumultuous. We know that Nico is a completely moronic general manager, and we know that Kidd is not happy with him. He doesn't like the moves that he made he didn't want Doncic traded. He was pretty clear about that. So, yeah, that was someone that I'm like, I think that's someone that you should do intel work with and see if you can try and pry him away. Plus, they interviewed him in 2020, and they loved the interview that Kidd did in 2020. So I was thinking, right, that's smart intel. I like that. And I like the Udoka one as well. Not for any other reason other than he's one of the best head coaches in the league. So, yeah, absolutely. But I would have capped it around about 2 or 3. I'm not going 5 or 6 because that just starts making you look desperate. The way you want to do it is, like, for instance, if they did go and hire Brown or go and hire Jenkins and then Kidd shakes free, you shouldn't have any regret because you should only hire the head coach that you're 1,000% certain is going to be who you're wanting to take that next step. So who gives a fuck if the next person frees themselves up? So that should be your thinking. So I don't want them to hire someone just because someone else didn't get free. I want them to be 100% locked in. That's my candidate. That's who I love. I don't care if the next person I don't care if Spoelstra becomes available tomorrow. That should be their attitude. So that's why I disagree with you there, Dylan.
Yeah, and that's fine. You don't gotta agree, obviously. And at the end of the day, again, I stand firm on this. If they ask every single team about how they feel about their head coaches, I'm perfectly okay with that because they're not competing with other teams for coaches. They're not. They're the only team out there with a vacancy. I would rather them get turned away by the Miami Heat or the Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks. Get turned away. At least you made an attempt to see how they feel because who knows? What if you get stunned and they tell you, yeah, sure, you could talk to him. All of a sudden, now you have a really good candidate on your hands, and you have a really good candidate that you could possibly bring in to replace Tom Thibodeau. You know, you're a team with championship aspirations right now. You don't want to just hire someone for the sake of hiring someone. You want to ensure you're getting the right guy. And who knows, maybe the right guy for them is on a different team right now. But you know, if that other team allowed us to get the opportunity to interview him, now you're in a good shape. You know, obviously that could, you know, it could create some awkward interaction. I get it, especially like if they don't end up hiring that guy, but they requested to interview him. I understand all that, but at the same time, when you're in a situation like this where you're looking to win a title next season, but you're also looking for a head coach, go ahead and see what every team feels. See what every single team in the league feels about their head coach. And if they tell you, F off, get off my phone, okay, great. Now you're on to the next guy. You're on to the next one. You know what I mean? I stand firm on that. I firmly believe that their process is the right process. I think that they're doing everything correctly here. I understand that there's, you know, some weird feelings about how they're going about it, but I personally see nothing wrong with what they're doing. I firmly stand on that. I want to give Spencer an opportunity to jump in on that because I'm sure there's and Luca too, even, you know, both you guys. I want
Oh
to give
yeah,
you guys an
man.
opportunity to jump in on
It's
that
great, man.
because
I agree with you, man. I mean, looking at your point of view, I can see that too. You know what I'm saying? To do your due diligence before you go and do a hire. You know what I'm saying? So I agree. But I was gonna say, don't Denver and Memphis gonna have an opening too because they got interim coaches, or did they name like full coaches
they
yet?
already have
They
they already named their guys.
Denver
They
and
already named
Memphis.
them.
Denver and
they named
Memphis.
they named Adelman the official head coach.
Yes, they did. Yes, they
Oof.
did.
Both teams, Denver and Memphis, have coaches.
As of right now, yes.
Oh,
As of
okay.
right now, I believe. I believe with Memphis, but I know for a fact Denver did hire Adelman full time. I know that for a fact. So
Okay, cool.
at this very current time, the Knicks are the only team without a head coach of sorts.
But yeah, man, I mean, your point, like I said, that's why we come on the panel, man, to agree to disagree and then hear other people's points. So
Yeah.
I can't be mad at your point. So that's, you know what I'm saying? I mean, listening to that, it's
Yeah.
like you make some good points on that. So, you know, it's good. You know, you can see both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I mean it's that simple. Luca, I want to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
that because we
yeah.
had a pretty heated
Um,
discussion with that.
Oh, it wasn't really eating. It was a fun,
you get
engaging,
my point.
engaging
You
discussion.
get my point. Engaging is what I mean. Not heated,
Absolutely.
but you know what I mean.
First of all, I want to say what's up to Jose Hopewell as well. He says Sam Cassell would be a good interview. As Man Cave mentioned him first, and I was like, and he has been a name that's mentioned before, not just among Knicks circles, but just coaching vacancies across the league. I'm surprised he hasn't even taken a job yet because they say he's very smart, very tapped into the players. He'd be an interesting look. And you guys pretty much hit some nice points on the board as well. It's up to Nimar. He says the Knicks need to hire Johnny Bryant's my A guy. I've actually warmed up to Mike Brown and Taylor Jenkins because originally I was like, you know, Mike Brown, is he the guy to help this team win a championship? But I was like, you know what? Maybe I should put that off to the side because how do we make use of this roster? Mike Brown is an offensive wizard. There is no question. If you want my honest opinion, and again, Mike Brown has his flaws. He's not, in my opinion, he's not really a great defensive coach. He'll have to bring a defensive guy with him, personally. But that offense, his first year in Sacramento hummed. I loved watching the Kings. So that's a two-man game right there. Sabonis and Fox, that's a two-man game right there. Keegan Murray, rookie, flourishing. Kevin Huerter having a career year. Trey Lyles being a supporting piece off the bench. Malik Monk having a phenomenal year. Six-man. And I think the flaw with Brown was obviously defensively, and I think they adjusted it in this. I should say the league adjusted to him in the second year. But to me, the one move that, in my opinion, threw off the entire Sacramento Kings thing in terms of what they wanted to do offensively, DeMar DeRozan trade. That just made absolutely no sense, in my opinion, to trade for DeMar DeRozan because DeMar DeRozan's a heavy on-ball player, and he's very much a mid-range guy. And yes, they needed a potent scorer outside of Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox because they needed like a guy who could get a bucket, but that wasn't the right fit at all, in my opinion. And they got worse. They got worse defensively. They traded Kevin Huerter. I mean, Huerter was more of a shooter, but at the end of the day, also Monty McNair got fired. So it's not like, oh, Mike Brown was solely responsible. Monty McNair got fired. And Monty McNair was, I believe, an executive of the year 2 years ago, along with Mike Brown being the head coach of the year. So it wasn't totally Mike Brown's fault. I do address the flaws. Taylor Jenkins, the thing with him in Memphis. First of all, he's 40 years old. The dude could clearly evolve. He's a young coach, and I think he could get better. He's not somebody who's stuck in his ways. In terms of Tyler Jenkins, questions about his offense have been mentioned in the last year. Apparently, he had to fire some assistants on his staff, lack of pick and roll being ran. But the one thing that Taylor Jenkins did with Memphis, first of all, he plays a heavy bench. He trusts his young players, number two. Number three, which Benji Ritholtz of Knicks Film School brought this up. Great point. Every single fan, I could say all four of us overlooked this. Why did Tom Thibodeau never experiment with his own defense? Ever. With how bad the Knicks were defensively. Why did he never experiment with his own defense on a single possession with how bad the Knicks were defensively? And again, I know Tibbs is not, the zone defense type, man coverage, all this stuff.
But here's another thing, though. He never adjusted to a zone defense being played on his team. Because that's how Miami was beating us. Miami was beating us, and he can never figure out the zone defense.
True.
That's true, and that's one of the knocks on Tibbs. And Benji argued, in his opinion, that was Tibbs' biggest qualm, in his opinion, was not running at least the zone defense proportion, because with the zone defense, whether you're running a 2-3 or a 3-2, you're not allowing your worst players to be in the action. You're not allowing them to be exposed openly. Zone, everybody's flying around. There's no man coverage assignment. And if Taylor Jenkins, fixes up his offense, and the defense, he runs his zone, he plays a heavy bench, I'm like, sure, go all in. He's a young coach, he could get better, he could learn from his mistakes. So I like the two potential hires.
Me too.
A conspiracy theory that was floated by Schwinny Poo of, as I mentioned, the Strickland, and I kind of agree with this too. Maybe they will eventually interview Johnny Bryant, give him the job. And I know it might seem like a farce because the media is already criticizing the Knicks for not having a process. And obviously you guys might agree. Leon Rose, as Dylan said perfectly, does not care about optics. He cares about results in a process. The problem with a lot of people, casual Knicks fans, people who don't even watch the Knicks, commenting for some reason on the Thibodeau fight, which made absolutely no sense. I was arguing with people, regardless, whatever, is that a lot of people look at the results. They say, hey, Thibodeau got you these conference finals for the first time in 25 years. Why are you firing him? And obviously to the casual fan, to the normal fan perspective, that's like, wow, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And obviously when you look at it with perspective, with some sophisticated analysis, you would tell him, hey, he was not exhausting all the resources he had on the team. And it's not to justify Leon Rose trading 6 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. we'll obviously break it down to the personnel expected.
On the roster in a minute,
Right?
Absolutely, of what needs to happen. But I do, and I must say, I'm not a big fan of Jason Kidd. I think the problems that Tibbs had as well. Heavy isolation ball with Luca Doncic and Kyrie Irving. I think that's a problem. Not trusting a bench.
Can I just jump in on that though?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
to be fair, that is kind of the roster though. If you got Jalen Brunson as your sixth man, he is a heavy isolation player. Luka Doncic is Mr. Isolation. You kind of have to have a roster built around isolation. You can't have a free-throwing offense if your main dude, your main ball handler, is an isolation player. I think that he would amend his offense with the personality he's got. I think he's that type of coach. So we can't really judge because we've only seen him with a Luka Doncic, with a Kyrie Irving, with the Jalen Brunson, to a heavy isolation.
He was on the Bucks too. He was the Bucks coach though. Jason Kidd was the Bucks coach.
Yeah,
I know you. I mean, obviously Giannis loved him in Milwaukee. Obviously, we'll get into the personnel thing, but Ime Udoka, I think he has room to grow as a coach. A lot of people talk about his offense and say like he's not great there, but you guys got to remember he also coached the Boston Celtics, led them to a finals appearance in 21-22. I remember calling the finals like, wow, this guy's really impressive. But great. Udoka, I like the prospect of him. Kid, again, I'm like 50-50 on, not really much. But again, I think the problem with, and I'll tell you, let me break down a scenario real quick. You call Pat Riley. Leon Rose calls Pat Riley. Hello. Hey, this is Leon from the Knicks. I'd like to ask about Eric Spoelstra. that phone's going to be hung up immediately. I love for the reaction. I love to see hear the Knicks call Miami about Eric Spoelstra.
I agree. That's who they should call.
If he were to ever break free from the Knicks, I would be. I'm sorry, not the Knicks. Excuse me, the Miami Heat. Because the problem was with the Heat, they never fully rebuild under Pat Riley. Pat Riley's never been a fully rebuilder, guys. Either we're mediocre, we're at the end of we're the lower seeded team, like the 8th or 7th. And you saw this after the LeBron era. You're going to see this after the Jimmy Butler era. This team never fully rebuilds. They're just mediocre, or they're top heavy. And as of right now, they have not won a championship in more than 10 years. So Pat Riley, I think, is past. Regardless, don't care about the optics. Let the Knicks run their search again. The problem with trading, the problem with having an interest in Jason Kidd. Let's just say he's interested. What's the compensation? I remember, what was it, 2014 when the Bucks traded for Kidd, 2 seconds. What's the price now? What if the Mavericks say, hey, you know what? We see that you're desperate. First round pick. And the Knicks don't exactly have a lot of compensation assets and cap space as well. But cap space is another thing. But I just wanted to comment on that. I won't mind Tyler Jenkins as well. Those are my top 2 in terms of the head coaches out there. And also another thing, and I talked about the media game. You saw James Edwards throwing out just random names. James Borrego, Darvin Ham. Hell no, I do not want.
Right.
Oh God, no.
And this again, media game. You got to see who's really tapped in and who's not. And there's no disrespect to James Edwards, but these could be just names for speculation. I think James Borrego was one of them. Darvin Ham. Obviously, Mike Brown and Tyler Jenkins are going to be interviewed. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I don't think it's a flawed process a lot of people see. But I could understand why some people were like you Man Cave and Don would say, hey, it's a waste of time just to go after an employed coach right now. It just doesn't make any sense unless you see the right fit. But I will say about Jason Kidd before we move on to personnel, he knows how to connect with his players.
Another thing.
Saw that with Jalen Brunson. And again, amidst all this Tom Thibodeau talk and the X's and O's, you need a coach to connect with the players.
And
with Johnny Bryan, he could be our Joe Mazzola. You never know. A young coach that can connect with players. I don't know, man. We'll see, man. They got. We all say on the panel, the Knicks look like they don't have a plan, but I think they do have a plan, man. So behind the scene, Leon Rose has been playing chess while everybody else playing checkers. So he'll surprise us, and we'll see what happens, man. So hey, I'm with it, man. What else we got to lose? What else we got to lose?
Absolutely. Just to get to comments, what's up, Rafuccio, Capitan, sup, fellas? Do you think the Knicks attempted to trade for a coach? First they have to talk to the coach to even begin, trade compensation talks. You can't just talk with the front office and say, hey, we want to trade for your coach. Obviously, that's an obvious no, unless the front office somehow says, okay, you could talk to the coach. Again, no disrespect to the front offices of those, but they would just say no. If the Knicks call Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors, they're going to say no. Obviously, if they're going to call the Indiana Pacers, they're going to say no. If they're going to call the Oklahoma City Thunder,
I think they have to talk to the front office first because the guy's under contract. He's under contract. If he wasn't on contract, that's different. But he's under contract, so that's tampering charges. So they have to go through the front office first.
Yeah, and we'll obviously move into the personnel aspect right now, but I want to ask you guys real quick. It's not a huge deal, but this was reported by Amico Hoops. It's not a big deal because I really don't trust the source, but you guys think that Rick Brunson will be on the coaching staff next year?
I'm gonna jump in on that. I think
small aspect. I think so.
I'll jump in on it. I think he'll still be on the coaching staff, but I will also not be surprised if he's not. It really depends on how the new head coach feels. I think everyone here can agree that having Rick Brunson on the staff is a lot of nepotism. Because Jalen Brunson is on the team. So, obviously you're not going to want to upset Brunson because if, Jalen, if Jalen wants his dad to still be on the coaching staff, I'm sure that, the new coach will see if there's a resolution with that. But who knows? What if Rick Brunson and whoever our new head coach is, what if their coaching styles don't clash? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I want what's better for the team. I really do not care if Rick Brunson is on the staff or not, because what does Rick Brunson really do?
Exactly.
What
Right.
does he really do? I'm not trying to like throw shade at anyone, but like I think we all know why he's on the staff. It's pretty obvious. So like,
Mhm.
he has been an assistant coach in the NBA for a while, so it's not like he's strictly only coaching because Jalen is on the team. But at the same time, there's a reason he's on the Knicks, and it's largely because of that. So, whatever happens, happens. I mean, personally, I don't think however it plays out is that big of a deal. I've seen some people jokingly say he'll be the head coach. If Rick Brunson's the head coach, my mind might implode. I'm just going to say that.
That would be awful.
If he's the head coach, my mind might implode. But, regardless of that, whether or not he's on the coaching staff still with new coach, I mean, I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. I think it just ultimately depends on if that head coach feels like that his coaching style can clash with, Rick Brunson's coaching style. Whatever it is, that's really what it'll boil down to. So, do I think he'll be on the staff? If you had to ask me right now, I think he'll still be here next year. But at the same time, I would also not be insanely surprised if he's not. So that's really all I got to say about that one.
Mhm.
The way I view it is a couple of things. So first of all, did you guys hear the rumors that there's a lot of players in the organization that are unhappy with the power that Rick Brunson?
Yeah, that was the
He did.
Miko Hoops
Yeah.
report.
Exactly. That's been something that I've been kind of hearing, that there's some players that are unhappy with the kind of power that he holds. So,
But could we
That's-
blame Tom Thibodeau for why he had so much power? We could look at it that way though too.
no, I mean, I think it's probably just because, our best player's dad is the coach, assistant coach. I think that's probably what it is. And he knows that he's got that power.
Yeah.
He knows that Jalen
Yeah,
Brunson's
it's fair.
the king of the city. So, I mean, he's got a lot of strengths.
That's fair, yeah.
I'm not blaming
Just posing
Tibbs
the
for that.
question, because who knows? I mean, what if Thibodeau did give Rick Brunson too much power, and that's why he had as much power as he had? You know what I mean? Or at least according to what the players said about that. Because I mean,
that's just
we obviously only know so much about that.
we're just speculating at this point. But the way I view it is, do I think he should be our assistant coach? No. And I never wanted him hired in the first place because it adds too many problems.
Mhm.
You basically got to give him a job for life as long as Jalen Brunson's your point guard. You can't fire his dad. You've already just fired his quote unquote granddad. Tibbs was basically his like granddad. Now you're gonna fire his dad as well.
I'll say this though. Let's say that were to happen. Let's say that were to happen though, and Jalen did not feel good about that. What does that say about him? About Jalen? I'm
That's
curious.
true. You're right.
What does
You're
that say about
absolutely right.
Jalen? Because if
true. I mean,
because like think about this. I mean, if he cared more about how the team performs, I think he would understand that decisions like that have to be made for the better of the team.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if he were to say, let's say he did get upset that if Rick Brunson were to get fired, let's say he did get upset about that, and he was upset about that combined with Tibbs getting fired. What does that say about him? You know what I mean? I think we all know that Jalen Brunson is obviously an amazing player and an amazing mindset, but who knows if he ends up feeling that way about it? I think that changes a lot of perspectives about how we feel about him. Because
That's
if
true.
if you're not gonna understand why these decisions are being made for a team trying to win a title, then that says a bit about you as a player and a person. I'm just being honest.
yeah.
I'm not saying Brunson. I'm not saying Jalen is like that, because for all we know, he could easily not be like that at all, which would be a good thing. Obviously, we're just speaking in hypotheticals here. So it's something you got to think about.
Well, all I care about is him being comfortable because he's our best player. It's as
Well,
simple
yeah,
as
of
that.
course. You don't want to piss off your captain. So I totally get
So
that.
That's all I
But,
care about.
But you don't want to get him upset. But at the same time,
Right.
if these decisions are for the better of the team, then as a team captain, you should understand that. And I would be willing to bet too that Jalen had a say in the Tom Thibodeau firing. I'm not saying that he outright said, yeah, fire him, but I'm sure that they went and asked him if it was
Of course.
something that I'm sure they went and talked to him about it before they went ahead and did it. Because if they just blindsided Jalen and fired his head coach that he credits a lot for, letting him take the next step in his career, then yeah, Jalen would probably get upset about that. So, I'm sure that the front office is ensuring that their best player, the guy that they are building around, is happy in the situation that he's in right now. So, if a decision like that ends up having to be made, I'm sure, in terms of with Rick Brunson here, I'm talking about, I'm sure that again will become another discussion with Jalen about,
I mean, to be fair,
whether or not
nepotism
it has
is
to be
not-
done.
nepotism is not unusual in the league. I mean,
Oh
we're
no,
gonna
not
have-
at all.
We're
Not
we're
at all.
soon
I
gonna
mean, we have a
the-
father and son on the same team for
Well,
crying
that's
out
what I
loud.
was gonna say. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna have the entire LeBron James family be part of the Lakers. We've had the entire Thanasis Antetokounmpo nonsense along with Giannis and every other Giannis brother. I mean, nepotism is not unusual. It's all about making your star comfortable and happy, right? And it's not. It doesn't mean anything to do with Jalen at all. Jalen is as much of a pro as you're ever going to see. Like, he is a pros pro. We saw his podcast with Josh Hart. All he was just appreciative of Thibodeau. He didn't go in any rabbit holes about this was a disgrace or anything like that. He was just like, I appreciate him, and that was it. So I think that he understands, and I think I don't want any viewer to think that any of us are casting any aspersions on Brunson's character, because Brunson is as great a pro as you're ever going to have as your captain. It's just all about making him comfortable, and I just don't want too many changes. And I think any of us here, if your dad's or your coach for your entire life, and he's also your coach and your bench, and you fire him, you'd probably be pissed off.
Right.
That's you would. That's just human nature, right? So we have to be careful about it. I don't really want him to be on the bench. I never wanted him hired in the first place, but nor do I think we should fire him. I would just not have him as the assistant. I would just have him as an assistant, not the assistant.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
And I know I've been holding off the personnel thing. Two more things, and I just want to comment. I'm like, me and Donald talked about this during the playoffs. I want, for this next coaching staff, I want guys to do multiple things. I should say I want multiple guys to do things on the staff. Like, let's look at Coach Tibbs' coaching staff last year. We had a bunch of old heads. Lack of pejorative term. We had Mark Bryant. We had Mo Cheeks.
Othello Harrington.
Othello Harrington. Darren Erman, who obviously was a stayover, but I want guys like who could do multiple things. Like, okay, this guy's charge of analytics. I mean, Daisuke Yashimoto, Andy Greer are also Tibbs holders, but regardless, Spitfire, and it's not a huge deal. This is right before we move to personnel. Who was the player or players that got Tibbs fired?
Bridges.
This is entirely your opinion.
Yeah, right. I think it's Bridges, Precious Achua, some other guys they talked to on the team. You know,
Dylan?
I think that. He muted.
Yeah, I think he's muted.
Oh, I apologize. I did not realize I was muted. I was saying I think it's Bridges and Deuce. I think Deuce
did say something at the end of the series.
And that's what I was about to allude to, was that Deuce said something, after they got eliminated in Game 6 against the Pacers. He said, he felt like a lot of things that was going on throughout the year got exposed. I think he knows that team was flawed. He knows that system was flawed, completely flawed, and he was kind of just waiting for it to all come crashing down. And I think he, too, also felt some type of way about his usage, because if you look at it, his minutes were inconsistent. His minutes were definitely inconsistent. He would have stretches where he'd play a lot throughout the game, and then he'd play like 5 minutes in the whole second half or something like that. Or he'd have stretches where he should be out on the floor, but he isn't. I felt like in Deuce's eyes, he probably felt like Tibbs didn't trust him. He probably felt that way. And so, when that's happening, I feel like he had the biggest say in it. And I personally believe it was either him or Mikhail. And the reason I say Mikhail was because I think we all know the comments he publicly made about Tibbs' minutes back in March. So that's why I'm, considering him in that case. But it was definitely probably one of those two players who came out and said that they probably can't play for Tibbs again if he stuck around. It was probably one of those two guys. I personally think it was Deuce, because Deuce is on a smaller deal, so he is playing for something a little bit. He wants to make more money. He's playing for something a little bit. It's not like he's just, it's not like he's set. I know Mikal Bridges is also extension eligible, but Deuce McBride, I think we all know, can be making a lot more money than he's making. He took that very cheap deal that we signed to him immediately after the OG Anunoby deal, which, by the way, excellent deal by Leon Rose. But we all know that that's highway robbery because we know Deuce McBride can make more money than that. We know Deuce McBride can probably make close to $30 million on a 3-year deal at this point. He's that serviceable of a role player and a six man. So he's playing for something a little bit. He knows that if he's not playing, his value is not going up, and he's not going to make more money whenever he hits the open market again, which is set to be after this upcoming season. So, after next season, he will be technically a free agent as long as the Knicks don't extend him again. So I feel like it was him. I feel like he was the one who was like, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if I can play on this team anymore if Tibbs is still here. And if it was him, I don't blame him one bit. I don't blame him one bit.
Tibbs screwed him. Tibbs 100% screwed him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're gonna after me holding it all up, we're gonna breaking down the roster and potential moves. So I do have a fun exercise to talk about players we like, players that could be moved, whatever. Let's go to the tier maker. Let me pull it up. So I do also, by the way, I do have the Knicks cap space up, and we could obviously get into their financial situation with things that they can't do, things that they could do. Regardless, we've got untouchable. We've got players you would listen on. You got players that you would listen on and trade in the right deal. You would players that you would send away, get out of here, and likely out the door. UFAs, and then we also got Tibbs. Tibbs is
Hi, Tibbs.
Tibbs is right there. But
Right.
I will start. Untouched. Let me just say this real quick. Let's get to Nemo's comments as well. I think it was Josh Hart and Deuce McBride. I don't think it was hard.
I don't think it was hard.
No. I don't think it was hard. I feel like Josh Hart also went fired. I don't think so. I don't think it was hard. But regardless, I think everybody unanimously could agree. Untouchable, Precious Achiuwa.
Right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. All jokes aside, it's Jalen Brunson. He's the only untouchable. So we're going to move him.
He should be the only one.
So again, there's just an ad down bottom, but we'll go through the list of players we have here: Precious Achiuwa, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, Campaign, Mitchell Robinson, Karl Anthony Towns, disregard Jericho Sims, PJ Tucker, Tyler Kolek, Ariel Hukporti, and Macomb Dottie. I also forgot to add in Kevin McCullough, but not really a major piece to say. But regardless, this is an open panel. Not really going to go in any specific order. Which players, whoever goes first, obviously, who would you listen on?
Everyone.
I would definitely listen on Bridges.
I think
Definitely.
Hard listen.
I think I would also listen on Hart.
Now, may I ask Dylan in response to yes, first of all, I unanimously agree. I would listen on Bridges. Right now, let's break it down. He's going to be a free agent next offseason, not this offseason. I'll pull up the contract details just so everybody could get, a refresher. First of all, he's eligible for a 4-year, $156 million extension. If you guys want to do the math on that, that's around $39 million a year. That is a hefty extension. And the Knicks do not right now, if we want to be objective, don't really have any leverage. They give up 6 first-round picks for him. He's obviously part of the Nova clan, so they might have a say. But overall, the Knicks right now do not have a ton of leverage. And I know, Donald, we've been talking about, Bridges, possibly getting role players, secondary ball handler. Like, I don't know what team's going to trade for him, if I'm being realistic. I don't think it's realistic that the Knicks trade him. Would I be happy if the Knicks traded him? I think so. In my honest opinion, I don't think he played as well as he should have, but it's also kind of unfair at the same time because he's being mirrored against what he was traded for. But if we were talking Mikal Bridges, put aside the return, or I should say the compensation we gave up, I don't think he played as well as he could have this season. He had a really good Boston series. He played well at the end of the Detroit series. The Indiana Pacers series, I thought he was way too inconsistent at times and way too invisible. Thoughts, guys?
I just think he played the whole year the same way. Like he was playing a regular season form, even in the playoffs. He never picked up his pace in the playoffs. He never upped his game. So that means to me, he's just like a lackluster player with a very low motor.
Very low.
So I think we're going to leave Bridges at woodless. And obviously, as I said, don't know what Knicks barely have any leverage at this very moment.
I just want to look at this tier because
Woodlisten,
is that just the tier just below untouchable in terms of like?
Yeah, Woodlisten is right below untouchable. Then it's Woodlisten and or basically and trade in the right deal. I'll obviously break that down because we'll get.
I would put Bridges there.
Okay,
I would have him because I want to trade him. But like I'm much closer to wanting to trade him than I want to trade Cat. But the thing, my only thing is, I just don't know where Cat fits in a championship roster. And
that's why he fits on the next one. Trade if it's in the right deal. There's only a couple of players you trade him for, so that'd be the right deal.
Right, that's it. It's like I think both those pieces. I'm not sure if I'm convinced that, but at least we know that Bridges can play championship defense when he wants to. There's times where he does it because he did it twice against Boston. In 2 games against Boston, he played championship defense, so he can do that. So you could possibly make that work. Cat just refuses to have anything to do with defense whatsoever, and that's a problem. So I'm really unsure. Bridges, I'm trading.
So we'll do this in terms of a vote. Donald, you would trade in the right deal, or would you do send him away, sell high, or he sucks?
No, because he doesn't suck. He definitely doesn't suck. So I would trade him.
All right. So now, Dylan, would you put him in Woodlisten and trade in the right deal, or just solely Woodlisten?
I would just solely listen, and I'll make it quick. Why? And the reason I'll make it quick. Okay. The reason is because he obviously had his inconsistencies this year, but I think that was a Tibbs problem. I think Tibbs did not get enough plays drawn up for Bridges. I don't think he got him involved enough. I think his offensive schemes of being so one-dimensional and very one-on-one was not fit for Bridges. I don't think that style was good enough for him, and I don't think he was ever able to get into a rhythm. I don't think he's a bad player, and we saw that in the playoffs. I don't think he's a bad player, and furthermore, too, I don't think you can just trade him away right away, especially after you gave up so much draft capital for him.
Yeah.
You kind of need to see what you can get out of him with a new head coach. So for me, I would just listen. It would literally have to be like a mind-blowing deal. So I would put him in would listen, not the second category. That's where I'd put him.
Man Cave, what do you say?
I'll trade that dude, man. Like I said, I don't like his motor. And I don't like his shots. He takes too many fadeaway shots. Unless somebody could change that, it's never going to change a player. It don't matter what system he's in. He shies away from contact. You cannot do that. I mean, he could have like Michael Adams, 5'3" on him. He'll still take away fadeaway jump shot. Dude, go straight up and get fouled, bro. Go up and get fouled, man. Absolutely. He shies away from contact. You can't fade away on every single shot. He's on the fast break on the layup. He'll fade away on the layup. What are you doing?
Facts. We're not worthy. 100%. Amen. 10 out of 10 take.
Nobody's going to change that. Nobody's going to change. I don't care what system he's in. Nobody's going to change his shot making. He's going to keep taking the same shots.
Jose real quick says, I'd listen to Cat, to be honest. Interesting perspective. I might tend to agree, actually. In terms of Bridges, as I said, I might have said this earlier. I said I would in the right deal, I would trade Bridges this offseason. You're not obviously just going to salary dump him and add assets. That would be completely erroneous. Bridges, as I said, put aside the package. I don't think he performed as well as he should have. Defensively, he was not consistent. Offensively, he was not consistent. This also goes with the synergy aspect that we were all talking about. There were times where Brunson was off the floor and Bridges would perform awesome on offense.
Yeah.
And then Brunson would be on the floor and Bridges would be almost a non-factor. But Man Cave, I do agree with you about the shot diet. Donald and I spoke about this. He's like, and then because when he was brought over from Brooklyn, Jeff and Dylan were on the Jeff Rasmussen of the Hot Hand Theory podcast. Does a great job. He and I and Dylan were doing the season preview. We're like, okay, Jeff, what are you expecting out of Mikal Bridges? Well, he says you would ideally the Knicks would want to get a hybrid of his Brooklyn self and his Phoenix self. His Phoenix self, 3-point shooting and elite defense. His Brooklyn self, shot creation and being able to at least somewhat run the bench unit. We didn't really get any of those consistently. That's the problem I'm dealing with. That's we're all dealing with that. But as you said, shot diet, shying. And you know what the worst part is? He didn't used to be this way. There were times where he'd go up for contact. Years ago, he used to be a lot more aggressive. And I'm sure the jump shot's going to get better through the offseason as he works on it and corrects it. Maybe the coach gives him a talking to and says, hey, you know what? This is what I want you to be. I know you're like technically in your prime and, really can't get better or worse as a player. You are where you are. But you know what? Take more shots at the basket. Take 3-pointers. Because the NBA player nowadays, the most efficient shots are your shots at the rim and your 3-pointers.
Exactly. Two things that Bridges doesn't do.
Exactly. And the thing with Bridges is he's the anomaly. He's like the DeMar DeRozan. A lot of mid-range jumpers, the fadeaways. Again, very low percentage shot. But yet somehow he made that. But yet with these above the break threes, which he usually is good at,
that's the problem. That's the problem. I don't think, and again, I'm only worried about who fits beside Jalen Brunson. Absolutely. I don't think Mikal Bridges really works beside Brunson because they don't really work together that well. Bridges really didn't help Brunson. See, with Dante DiVincenzo there, he helped Brunson because he was set hard screens. He was constantly moving because that's where he was brought up through Golden State. That's where he was.
He was also a high volume 3-point shooter,
and he knew his role. Spot up 3-point shooter, hit those threes, quick 3-pointers, set physical screens, be physical, be a dog. That's the kind of guy that works beside a Jalen Brunson as your two. I think an ideal two guard is someone like a Dante DiVincenzo, but also gets to the rim because that's your ideal shot diet. 3-pointer, rim, set hard screens, be physical, because that's the type of guy that Brunson likes. I don't know why they went away from that. That's why I do criticize Leon Rose, because a lot of those moves he didn't really fit with Jalen Brunson as well as Tibbs. It wasn't just Tibbs. It was Jalen Brunson as well. Cat and Jalen Brunson just didn't really fit because Cat is, again, he's not the ideal guy that's going to set hard screens. Roll to the rim, and that kind of guy wasn't really that kind of guy.
I think that also goes more with role, though. Donald, you brought up roles. You saw everybody on this panel. I'm guessing you all saw the report that players didn't know their roles, and that was the big confusion. That's to be fair. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with the analysis of DiVincenzo versus Bridges, but I'm going to put him in would listen because if you want my opinion, I don't think there's a realistic scenario where the Knicks trade him A, B, or a team comes offering for him. That's my personal opinion. Unless somehow the Knicks go out and try to trade for Giannis and Bridges is a part of the deal, fine, obviously. But right now, I'm putting him solely would listen because I don't think there's a scenario where he's going to get traded. Obviously, as once again, last time I mentioned it, you gave up 6 first-round picks for him, and he's also extension eligible. And let me say this. It's with the Knicks between the 1st and the 2nd apron. We can break down the financials later. I got the stats. They're between the 1st and the 2nd apron. This is what you would be doing if you extend Bridges. Really limiting yourself. And you would have to offload some players. But regardless.
But that's why you should trade up.
Right. But again, I agree with you, Don, but you also got to have a buyer. Right. That's why I'm saying solely would listen. But regardless, Precious Achiuwa, he's likely out the door. That was reported. Yeah. Obviously, this not satisfied with his limits in play. I must say, I think he regressed from last year. I think Tibbs overused him a little bit. Too much at the 4. Defensively, yes, he's a 4, but too many times he was ran out there with Cat. That spacing layups were horrible. Anyways, OG Anunoby. Yeah, that was bad. OG Anunoby is our next player.
Untouchable.
OG is, to me, he's untouchable. I think he's untouchable.
I think he's untouchable. He's making too much money. You're attached to him for too long. You need to keep him around. Plus, he's like your most impactful perimeter defender. You got to keep
Amen.
that guy around, man.
Amen. Untouchable. Amen. All day.
I completely agree with all you. He's going to be listed as untouchable. OG, again, recently signed a contract with the Knicks this past offseason. I think he's on a great deal. I would say the Indiana series was 50-50 with me, but I think throughout the playoffs, he was really impactful. Surprisingly, his three-point shot wasn't there, but he was always consistent with the defense for the most part. That I could agree with. But OG Anunoby, we're leaving him as untouchable. Next up, our next player is Josh Hart, a conflicting player somewhat among the fan base. So open panel once again. I'll explain some other things that go along with Josh Hart.
Yeah, I think on this one, I think 3 players fit this. I mean, Josh Hart is one of them. Would listen to trade in the right deal. I
I'm
like
with you,
Josh.
bro.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, in the right deal, and like I said, it's 3 players: Hart, Robinson, and Cat. Even though I don't want to trade
I'm with
Robinson,
you.
but
I'm
you know
with
what I'm
you
saying.
because
But
with Hart, the thing with Hart is that it's clear that he could not fit in that starting 5. So you're gonna have to have him come off the bench. And
yeah,
don't get
yeah,
me
he's a
wrong, I
six
think
man.
Hart. Don't get me wrong. I think Hart is an impactful piece. I think the rebounding and the playmaking is valuable, but I think you can find something of better value, if you moved him. I think you could get a better player that can actually start or, even a more impactful bench piece if you move on from him. If you move him to the bench and he does well off the bench, okay, fine. You don't have to trade him. But if there's a player out there that's definitely 100% better that is available and that you can have him start, especially at the wing position,
Of
I would
course.
absolutely consider trading him. I would absolutely consider it.
That's what
What I
Nick
would
says.
do is I would have another tier. I would just have in between untouchable and would listen just in the keep tier because I can't put on in all good conscience have Josh Hart untouchable. I can't
Right.
because I
No.
know that he is definitely not an untouchable player. He is very flawed, but his motor is fantastic. We do need more guys like
Yeah.
that.
All right.
He's got the attitude. He's the heart, the team in many ways. He can't start though because we know about the issues when he starts. He's an ideal 6 man. I just wouldn't trade him either because he's so important to the synergy, the relationship with Brunson. Because again, it's all about keeping your superstar happy. Thus, I can't have him as untouchable, but nor would I have him in would listen. So if I was to choose between the two right now, I would have him as untouchable, but not because he's a great, incredible player, but just because he's really important.
Okay, but this is where it goes. As like if he has to be in the Giannis trade, you trade him or you keep him? Or is he going to hold up the deal? That's what you got to look at. Is he going to hold up a deal for Giannis?
Well, I mean, Giannis isn't going to happen this offseason.
No, I'm just saying. I'm saying
Uh,
that's a trade scenario. That's the only trade scenario. Is like if that trade came about, is he stopping you from getting Giannis
No,
or
no,
right? So
no.
so he'll be in the wood list and trade in the right deal. So that's why he's in that trade in the right deal.
All right, maybe just would listen then.
So Donald says would listen. Dylan and myself and Man Cave are all going to agree 3-1. Would listen, trade the right deal. Now I'll add this. Obviously, the Knicks are very tight with cap space right now. Just for the
Right.
numbers, they have minus 75 million cap space. That's just cap space. First apron, they're over the first apron, but not over the second. They're under that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Hart currently, let's pull up the numbers, is his contract he signed back in 2022 or 2023 was my 2023. I just want to make sure. 4 years, 80 million. It's about $20 million a year. It's an ascending contract, which means he'll be earning more money by the year. Now, 19 million this year, 20 million next year, and a club option for 22 million the year after. I think that's enticing for a team. Let's just say, my buddy TK brought this up on Twitter. What about the New Orleans Pelicans, right? They have a bunch. They're in mediocre land right now.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bunch of young players who could really contribute to this team. Jordan Hawkins, Trey Murphy, Jose Alvarado is a backup point guard.
Mm-hmm.
Think of those. Herb Jones
Yeah.
as possibly a starter. Imagine those guys you could collect for one Josh Hart. Josh Hart, again, $20 million. You know what? I'm going to stop that. I'm going to stop the screen for a second. Folks, we're loading up the trade machine. Just for right now, just for purposes.
He's loading it up.
We're going to load up the trade machine this scenario. Again, we don't have to trade Josh Hart, but this is a sample scenario. Again, let me say this. In my opinion, he's not the only guy in this scenario. So just got to wait for this to load. Hold on. Okay, just move that
See,
aside.
I'd be trading Bridges for those guys that you mentioned.
That's what's been said.
That's what there's got to be a take. So I'm just going to zoom out for a sec. All right, hold on. Just want to make sure everything's running. All right, so obviously it's trending players being traded. Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy's got a big contract, by the way. If you guys haven't seen, I'm going to pull up the numbers on him. Let me see if I got my iPad right here. I think it's 20-something odd million he's earning. It was a rookie level extension. Yeah, I was surprised when I saw the numbers.
Look at Hoops Hypes.
Yeah, let me pull up the numbers on Trey Murphy here because I luckily got my iPad. All right, Trey Murphy. It's a 4-year contract he's currently on. By the way, he did miss a portion of the season with I believe it was a torn labrum, which he's expected to fully recover from. He only played like 50-something odd games, but his contract when he signed it was 4 years, $112 million. Now you do the math in AAV, 4 years, 112.
Oh, yeah.
That's $28 million. So that's obviously more than Josh Hart. So let's load up the trade machine. Do the Knicks, do the Pelicans. Again, this is obviously is it a scenario? It's a potential scenario, not that it's going to happen. Anyways, Pelicans are at the bottom. Let's throw Josh Hart in. Trade to Pelicans. Okay, that's $19 million going out. Let's talk about our needs too. DeJounte Murray's not getting traded, neither is Zion. CJ McCollum, I don't think I want anything to do with that. You also, again, young players, potentially Jordan Hawkins, he's got a team option, $4.7 million for 2 years each. Herbert Jones, he's an intriguing option as a thick wing.
Mm-hmm.
Can come off the bench, possibly. As I said, Jose Alvarado. If you trade, again, this is a potential player that we'll talk about. Mitchell Robinson potentially might be traded this offseason, as a lot of Knicks fans have been talking about. I can understand the hesitancy, but he is on an expiring deal. Donald, I know you liked him in the draft last year. Ivis Missy?
Yves Missy. I do like Yves Missy. He was really good last year. He had a very strong year.
So he's a potential player. Let's roll down the list. Okay. Elfrid Payton, no. Brandon Boston, no. I think you're getting at the end. Okay. So these section of players I'm closely looking at. Now, obviously, the Knicks can trade more than one player. Deuce McBride could be in the deal. Mitchell Robinson could be in the deal, whatever. If you had a preference for right now, which role players would you select?
Is this for Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges?
This is for Josh Hart because we're on. I know, man. I know you want to trade Mikal Bridges, but obviously this got to be a buy. I'm trying to present something. The Knicks offloading a contract for a select, and the idea is you want to offload like 1 to 2 players to get as much depth as possible. That's the thing. We're talking about depth. We're talking about bench options. We're talking about possibly a secondary ball handler next to.
But can I be perfectly honest? I don't think Josh Hart has that much value outside the Knicks. I think he's got more value as a Knick than he does outside. So I think that Bridges would have more value to get those kind of players like a Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, these kind of dudes, than a Josh Hart, because Hart had his best years as a Knick. I just don't know about his value outside of the Knicks. I think he's almost in the perfect scenario here, and I think if you took him outside, I don't think teams are going to want to give up their best players for a Josh Hart, because he is limited. He is a limited player.
It's a good point.
But I would take Herb Jones, Jordan Hawkins, and Jose Alvarado, 3 players for either Bridges or Hart. Man, they could help the Knicks out more.
And Donald, I must say, I don't disagree with your point that obviously, Knicks might overvalue Hart because of his importance to the team as opposed to the others. But, he played, I'd say, fairly well on the Trailblazers before coming here. That's why we traded a first-round pick for him. That's just a point to make. But I think, obviously, I truly don't know what the Pelicans need in terms of a player. Maybe Josh Hart's that guy. Maybe Mikal Bridges is that guy. Who knows? But regardless, obviously they got a lot of contracts, and obviously the Pelicans have to pivot in some sort of direction. They're mediocre. They're bottom of the barrel right now. They have a lot, and the risk for them taking Josh Hart on is they got big numbers. Zion Williamson, $39 million over the next 3 years each. DeJounte Murray, they traded for him 3 years with $31.5 million AAV. CJ McCollum, they have 1 more year on him. Trey Murphy, as Man Cave was mentioning, a possible trade option.
I would acquire Trey Murphy. I like Trey Murphy.
I do.
But Trey Murphy's going to be making more money. That's he make more money than Josh.
That's true, and the Knicks might have to add another player.
That's why you go with Herb Jones, Hawkins, and Alvarado.
Yeah, if it's a Josh Hart exercise, then yeah, and against the 3 smaller players, I suppose.
I'm trying to find the so this is per Doing It Dotson. I don't know how reliable he is. He writes for Clutch Points, Forbes Sports, a couple other outlets, Sports Illustrated. The Pelicans' alleged asking price for Trey Murphy is a veteran who can contribute in the playoffs, a young prospect with potential, multiple first-round picks. The Knicks do not have multiple first-round picks that could trade because of the Stepien rule. So, are we doing Herb Jones? Are we doing Jose Alvarado? Again, this is not 100% going to happen. We're just basing it off Josh Hart because we have other players to get to as well.
Yeah, I mean, Alvarado could be our T.J. McConnell and Caruso. You know what I'm saying?
That's
best.
True.
You know, and a ball handler too.
He's a dog.
Yeah.
So we'll add him in. Obviously, you know what? I'm going to pause this because we obviously get other players as well. I'm going to pause that for a brief time and bring up the tier maker. Here we go. Okay, so we'll bring it up. And here we are. We're back to it. So we said most part consensus, listen to trade with Josh Hart. Deuce McBride, are we doing the same?
Yeah. The right deal.
Yeah.
One of the most valuable contracts in the NBA right now.
I'll agree.
Yeah.
I would listen. Ideally, I'd like to keep him, but he's not the perfect player.
That's true.
So I would listen. I mean, to be honest, I would listen to everyone. The only untouchables are really
right.
Those 2 dudes.
I think in the playoff do show, like I said, man, you can't trust him as a ball handler. And he's been on the Knicks. He hasn't really developed as a point guard, though.
That's true.
That's right.
That's what Donald said in terms of a player. So if we're going to put him in the would listen trade in the right deal, as we were talking about the whole Pelican scenario, I think this guy is good as gone, Mr. Campaign. Absolute dookie in the playoffs.
He's a free agent anyway.
Exactly.
Anyway. And
he's out the door. I thought he played okay in the regular season, but in the playoffs he got too much time. He sold his soul for that one.
Can't stand him.
Dylan, I think said this game 1. Every shot he takes, he thinks is a good shot.
Yeah, he doesn't know what a bad shot is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move this to the side. Mitchell Robinson, very much an important player.
To be fair, I'd probably keep him as untouchable.
Really? Now, I might
add... He is not untouchable for me.
Unfortunately, Man Cave vanished for a quick second. But right now, why people are Donald, I could agree with in terms of impact, and we saw that. I'll give you 2 reasons why I think he's a possible trade candidate and would listen. Number 1, he is on the final year of his contract. What if the Knicks don't re-sign him? What does an extension look like? The Rockets the Rockets just extended Steven Adams, which could have been a possible Knicks free agent target, $13 million a year. And obviously the Knicks cap is not that big. Number 2, I mean, obviously you want stuff for him if you're going to end up trading him. Number 2, Dylan brought up the injuries. This was probably his healthiest. Again, he missed the first part, but throughout the playoffs, he was persistent, and his durability wasn't really concerned. So you kind of want to sell high off of that, if we're being honest. And if you want assets in terms of players and draft picks, I think he's the right guy. You're not going to get multiple first-round picks for him. But
I'll put it this way, and I'll make it as simple as this. If the Knicks make trades this offseason, that is the first guy they're going to be sending at the table. That's all I'll say about that. He's the first guy they'll be sending and offering. So,
why is that?
Because he has value, and because he's always been hurt and he's been unreliable to keep around long term.
They wouldn't want to take a chance.
You can't even it's already tough to play him in certain scenarios because the free throw struggles, the lack of offensive, versatility. Don't get me wrong. I believe the defense and the rebounding is extremely important. But at the same time, if you can find a better piece and one that can actually give you some spacing, one that can give you some creation while also providing a similar impact on the glass, I would do it. And the contract along with the injuries too, I think out of all players the Knicks have, he's one of the most tradable. I really do.
So the way I'm at with it is if you even planning on having Karl Anthony Towns anything to do with this roster, then you need a Mitchell Robinson beside him.
No, I agree. You need a center. I do agree with that.
But it's not just that center. I mean, the kind of center that you're asking for is going to be far more expensive than a Mitchell Robinson.
The thing is though, like, yeah, you need a center to play alongside Towns, but we just watched Mitchell Robinson miss close to 60 games because of an injury. This isn't like a guy who's has dealt with one injury his whole career or whatever. No, this is a guy who's dealt with several lower leg injuries. At this point, he's kind of like a ticking time bomb as to when will the next one come. When's the next time he's going to have a major leg? When's the next time he's going to have a major leg injury or a major knee injury, whatever it may be, to where it keeps him out for weeks or months or something like that, and then you don't have him anymore. You don't have his impact or whatever. Why keep him around? I'm not saying he's a bad player when I say why keep him around, because I think there's a big difference here. Because if I thought he sucked, I would have just outright said I don't think he's a good player. But right. I do think he's a good player. It's just the best ability is availability. And while he was available during the playoffs, availability has not been something he's been good at doing for a larger part of the last 3 to 4 seasons. So if the Knicks could sell high on him, I absolutely would do it. I would.
But if you look at the strategy that the Pacers and the Celtics employed, it was to get him off the court, not because he's asked, but because he's absolutely vital to the way the Knicks play. He was vital. They needed to. He was basically. They couldn't deal with him. They couldn't deal with him on the glass. They couldn't deal with him protecting the rim. So they had to get him off the court because his one weakness is obviously his free throw shooting. They had to get him off the court. That is just a fact. The strategy was hack and Mitch. They didn't do it just for shits and giggles. It was because the Knicks were dominant with him on the court. I want to ride it out at least until the trade deadline with Mitchell Robinson. I want to see.
I'll put it out this way. I do agree that I think they should see what they can keep out of him for next season. However, if they get offered a deal where they just simply can't turn it down, but they have to give up Mitch for it, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I would do it so fast.
That goes in the category of woodless and trading the right to a man cave.
Right. Yeah, back man had a little power outage. I don't know what happened.
Really? But anyways,
like a storm. Yeah.
I gotta hear your thoughts on Mitchell Robinson. Which category you're putting him in? And obviously, Dylan and Donald were actually just debating why they were put in such category. Donald believes that he would be untouchable because of his offensive rebounding, and defense overall. Dylan is kind of closer to my perspective, saying he's not a bad player. He's a really impactful player, but he's on a contract year. This is the final year of his contract. Teams might want to look at that and say, hey, you know what? Value of contracts only earning $15 million and injury history. Do you consider toying with that? So I'm going to hear your thoughts on Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, I'm with Don. Mitchell Robinson. I mean, he's. I mean, gonna say untouchable, but like I said, for his contract is very minimal. $15 million. That's a steal compared to like Clint Capella and them other guys. I mean, injury is a big thing, but when he's healthy, man, I mean, the guy could play against Embiid. He could play against any center. He plays like a man, like down there and stuff like that.
See,
you got the teams.
I don't mean
put like
to
2 and 3 players on.
That's like the one big thing for me. When he's healthy. When is he ever healthy? He was healthy in the playoffs, sure, but we also just watched him miss 60 games this year. We've watched him miss several games in other years. You know what I mean? It's a big if he's right,
but
it's like how much more are we going to say that?
Okay, well, I mean, but that's it. You get rid of him. That's another dog you're getting rid of. Then you get more soft players. Then you want more cat. You want to get more cat type players. But that's what I'm saying. But the thing about it is, Mitchell Robinson, they have like 2-3 players on this guy in the postseason. People don't do that on Karl Anthony Towns. They don't double team him. Karl Anthony Towns can't even play against Embiid. He plays soft against him. So you got to stop going with these soft guys. We need more tougher guys. You know what I'm saying? We need more dogs.
Yeah, man,
I
I
mean,
hear
when
you.
Mitchell
I do
Robinson's
hear
not, like I said, but he's one of the players. Like, if he goes to another teams are like they're ready to get him. They don't care about the injury history because they know when he's there, he's going to impact them. Especially especially you play in the playoffs. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because he make a difference because he dominated the Cavs. He dominated Mobley and Jared Allen by himself. He neutralized those guys. These other guys on the Knicks can't do that. You know, Hartenstein can't do that.
Yeah,
Cat can't do that.
it's a
Amen,
fair
brother.
I mean,
point.
he's a unique player. He's a
Amen.
unique player. He's a unique player. But like I said, and the thing about his contract is only $15 million compared to like, I mean, I could see if he's getting paid $40 million. He's not getting paid. He's getting paid peanuts. And you need a guy to do the dirty work. We don't have guys that do the dirty work on our team. It's only Josh Hart that does the dirty work. You know, Cat could get some rebounds, but other than that, he's not doing dirty work.
Trust
We need
me,
guys that can
Yeah,
move their
yeah.
feet. We
and the
need guys that
Pacers
can
were
move their
far
feet.
more
We need
worried
guys.
about
Yeah.
the Pacers and the Celtics were far more worried about Mitchell Robinson's impact than Karl Anthony Towns' impact, because Mitchell Robinson absolutely changed every single minute he was on the floor. He changed how they had to maneuver us. He was that important. That's why they employed the Hack and Mitch.
Yeah.
No,
And
it's fair.
that's why they did it, because get him off the floor because he was that good. So, I mean, I don't really agree with this tier list because, again, the only untouchable should be a superstar. Mitchell Robinson's not a superstar. It would be
Yeah,
the
he's
tier
not a
below,
superstar, right?
as in like a keep, a firm keep, rather than untouchable. But he'd be in that kind of category. But if we're looking at that tier list, it would be untouchable. Just pure
I mean, because you saw during the regular season when he was out, how we was playing. We was in. I mean, at the center position, we was getting manhandled at the center position, even though Cat was getting double doubles and stuff like that. I mean, it really wasn't doing nothing. He wasn't really an anchor on defense for us at the center position. We was getting,
Well, let me also say for the record, I think it's also what what this next coach wants. If
True.
he sees Cat as a 5 and says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going all in with this offensive identity," then your best shot is Cat at the 5. I know that's going to be, obviously bad defensively. We all know that, but
Mhm.
obviously the big thing that our analytics guys, people from like Hot Hand Theory talk about is like, if you get the best out of Towns offensively, that just takes it. Not going to say completely takes away how bad he is defensively. The impact offensively should be higher than his negative defensive impact, so to say. But listen, me and Dylan are not disagreeing with any of you two.
Oh,
What
of
you guys
course.
are saying in terms
No,
of
no,
the
no. Good
impact
points.
and the rebounding and stuff. It's just like, what if the Knicks lose out on Mitchell Robinson and I have kind of an inkling feeling, because he's been the longest tenured Knick to this point, he might sign a home discount kind of deal. But it's like also at the same time, like, what if the Knicks don't sign him? What if the Knicks lose him for nothing? You can't risk it. That's the issue. If it was if he had like another few years on the contract, it's like, okay, he is reasonable to keep around. Again, nothing
Mhm.
about his ability on the floor. It's just a matter of injuries being a issue. He had a really good postseason. Nobody's going to deny you that. But value of contract and injury history. That's why I'm going to put him personally in. Would listen and trade again. Am I going to trade him for peanuts? Absolutely not. I'm going to trade him in the right deal.
Oh,
because,
yeah,
again,
I agree with that.
Because again, play elite offensive rebounder, elite rim protector. Again, it's all about ability. I should say availability,
right?
and the contract that he has right now. So, very much great conversation around Mitchell Robinson. Karl Anthony Towns. Are we putting him in Woodlisten or untouchable? Or Woodlison and
Woodlisten in the right deal. Same thing with Mitchell Robinson. I mean, if it's with Giannis, then yeah. But if it's for other players, I don't want to do that.
I got him in the Bridges tier. The one
Woodlisten.
before. Yeah, I got him in that tier. I think he's a good player. I do. So
I much prefer him to Mikal Bridges. But I just don't think he fits. I just don't know. I don't think there's an organization where he'll fit in a championship roster. The Timberwolves had him as a 4 beside a Rudy Gobert. The Knicks would need to do the same thing. That's the thing. You can't.
That's why they got Gobert to move him to the 4, because he was terrible at the 5, he's terrible at the 4 too because he got cinder block feet.
That's the problem. That's why I just don't think there's a fit for him. I think that was a mistake of a trade when you think about it. Just because I don't think that there's a ideal fit for him. It's a lot of money you've taken on. You've taken on $200 million, and I just don't know where he is at his best because he falls over in the paint and complains looks for a foul call.
He does get a shitty whistle, though. You can't deny
He does.
that.
He does though. I gotta give it to him. He gets beat up. He gets mugged though.
He does,
I
but he
mean,
also falls over a hell of a lot too. And you can understand why
nah.
the
Some of that
officials.
is the players doing that because they allow them to play physical with him compared to they don't let him play physical with other players. Not to say he gonna play physical, but I mean his fouls are soft fouls compared to the fouls that he gets, which is crazy.
But he also is a low IQ player, and that's a problem for $200 million. He isn't the smartest. He gets himself in a hell of a lot of foul trouble, and
he does take
defensively he's completely incompetent. And I mean the recent news that he actually it wasn't necessarily Thibodeau that was continuing to play drop. It was actually Cat putting himself in drop at times. He was actually kind of going on his own volition, and it was driving players crazy. That's why there was some issues.
What's a drop coverage? I've never heard of a drop coverage in defense before. I've never ever heard that in my life playing basketball all my life. It's one of the most terrible options to drop coverage. Either zone or man-to-man, and that's about it.
But the
zone,
problem with was
drop coverage
is his own volition. Was my point.
Right. Drop coverage is like you just can't play defense. You're just shitty at defense. That's all it is. That's what it is.
Essentially, the idea of drop coverage is to protect the paint, and
But he's not.
I completely agree. Listen, the Tibbs, did drop coverage. Towns allowed himself to play drop coverage. I'm going to put Towns in Wood. Listen, I must push back and say that I don't think the trade was a mistake in that. Again, it's obviously a matter of where he fits. I don't think the trade was a mistake. I think Towns.
I would do that trade again. I would do the trade again.
I think.
He's better than. He's better than Randall. I'll agree on that.
Oh, absolutely. I think, as I said, when you look at it sophisticated, when you look at like the efficiency and the overall, when you look at impact on off numbers in terms of offense versus defense and all that, when he's put in the right situation, his offensive impact is higher than his negative defensive
And the hope here too is that a new head coach can maximize him offensively. I don't think Tibbs maximized him enough offensively. I don't think Tibbs gave him enough three-point plays. I don't think the offense set him up enough for that. I think a new head coach can maximize him offensively. And if a new coach can get him and Jalen Brunson in pick and rolls and pick and pops way more than Tibbs did, then we're going to see a lot better version of him next season. I know the defense is still going to be – the defense is probably not going to improve. I get that. But if the offense can make up for it, then they're in a better shape. So –
Donald, we were literally talking about during I think it was the Pacers and the Celtics series, like, this dude's not a post player. Like, he's a good post player. He's not a great post player. That's what we were saying. And that's a part of fit. That's a part of role. That's a part of all these different things. But again, it's going to come down to two things. Really, one, you could argue. Obviously, the utilization of Towns and how his offense is utilized, which there's multiple ways you could do that. And you know what? Here's another thing. I got to pull it back to Mike Brown for a second. He loves using his big man as hubs for passing. Domantas Sabonis was key for that. Towns put him at the high post, have him read, stand still passing. Just have him facilitate a little bit. Donald, I know you complained about Towns being a low IQ player. He doesn't sense the double team as quickly. I completely agree. If Towns is at a standstill position, looking for a handoff or waiting for a cut, he's going to pass. He's going to make that pass. But I will say,
he doesn't really do that enough, though. That's the problem. He can pass. He's a great passer when he does it, but he doesn't do it enough.
What's up, Coach Ed? Hope all is well. But in the position, he was like out of the post, low post, he wasn't a good passer. Out of the high post, he could be better because, again, Donald, I know you talked about Hartenstein. The Knicks are missing some passing with Hartenstein as a big man, facilitating at the hub. Get Towns to replace that. He's not going to be, again, you're not expecting him to be like Chris Webber or Vlade Divac when it comes to passing, or Nikola Jokic. If you could take a little bit of the playmaking pressure away from Brunson, you do it. But again, offensive role, and is he a 4 or is he a 5? That's going to be the next question for the head coach.
But that's the problem. We should know this by now, though. That's my problem. We should know whether he's a 4 or a 5. That's my criticism of him, but I do want to walk by. It's not that I dislike. In fact, I much prefer him to Mikal Bridges. Much prefer him. I think he's a freaking amazing player to watch. I loved watching him this year offensively, but I just think about like a championship team. Where does he fit in a championship team? I can't give you that answer. That's why I'm not sure if that was like the right move. What I wouldn't have done though is make both moves in that offseason. The only move I would have made is one or the other. If you're all in on Carl Anthony Towns, then you make that move, but I wouldn't have acquired Bridges. It would have been one or the other. I wouldn't have made both. So if I was to choose between the two, you make the Carl Anthony Towns deal all day long, and then you protect your 6 first-round picks, and you still got those assets because Bridges, I'm not quite sure what he offers alongside a Carl Anthony Towns, and there's not a coach in the world that's going to make Bridges, Towns, and Brunson work in the same lineup. I can guarantee you that.
100%. And with Taz, we said, whether it's a 4 or 5, big contention. We'll obviously see what happens with the new. And I'll say this: even if he starts as a 4, like he's in the starting lineup as a 4, let's just say alongside Mitchell Robinson, that doesn't disallow the coach from having some minutes, him playing at the 5. It's not like, if he plays at the 4, he's solely a 4. No, you could run lineups with him at the 5. That's also works inverse. If he's at the 5, you could run with lineups with him at the 4. It's vice versa. It could work if you have the right head coach with the right tactability. But real quick,
I think Woodlison's the right category for him. I would move Mikal Bridges down a category and keep Cat there.
Let's see what's up to Coach SIAR617. He says, "What's the topic?" We were talking. Bunch of our players, Carl Anthony Towns was just the topic, and we were talking about his role and utilization, stuff like that. And Coach Ed actually sent me this, and it was interesting perspective from Carmelo Anthony and Amon Shepard on their podcast.
Yeah, I saw that.
They said that if Carl Anthony Towns could add rim running to his game as a lob threat, that would be nice. But again, I don't think Towns has the hops, in my personal opinion. But that's a very good
cinder block feet. But You're right. It would be ideal.
It would be ideal. So we don't have a lot of more important players on this one. We got Jericho Sims. He's obviously got to ignore him.
He's gone.
He gone for Delon Wright. PJ Tucker, Tyler Kolek, Ariel Hukporty, and
the rookies, we really can't even gauge them. We can't even engage them until we get the new coach to let them play.
Yeah, you know what? Let me honestly add a row below. Let me delete this row real quick. I'm just going to say unknown at this point.
Right.
Because also
every single one of those rookies. So
yeah,
right.
I like McCourty and I like Kolek. I'm not sure about Daddy yet.
Dottie, I think he's got a nice jumper. I think if he's utilized in the right role, obviously, you get a coach like Jenkins. I think he'll succeed. I think he's got good rhythm as a shooter. Defense, I think he's getting better at, but obviously those are different things. But that is our tier list, comprehensive.
I got some news.
Yes.
According to Steve Popper Newsday, Jason Kidd is still possibly the favorite. The person with knowledge of the process says Jason Kidd remained a possibility, and Kidd is still possibly the favorite for the coaching role.
Interesting. Very interesting. I guess they're not done pursuing, but let's see. Coach says, I think the Knicks should and will trade for Jaren Jackson Jr.
Ooh,
from Memphis. He could do either or. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could shoot threes, rim protect, and
Now we're cooking. Now it's the kind of guy I like. Space the floor and protect the rim, please.
Now I'll say the biggest problem with Jackson is he is not the greatest playoff performer, but in terms of what you guys just mentioned, rim protection and spacing the floor, why not? But again, let me ask you guys this as well.
He's foul prone too, though.
Yeah, he's foul prone. Do you guys think the Knicks would entice that offer if they hired Taylor Jenkins as head coach?
I think they would think about it, but I don't know if it would turn into anything serious.
Right.
It would be. I think that's a kind of a smart deal, though. It's kind of interesting. Where do you guys lie on Giannis, and where do you guys lie on KD?
He's asking, where do you lie on Giannis? Where do you lie on KD? I'll start real quick, like a spitfire. No to KD. I don't want Kevin Durant. I think he's
Me
older.
either.
I think he's more injury prone. With Giannis, I don't think a trade's happening this offseason. A, B, the Knicks would have to trade all hell and whatever, every asset possible to get
They'd
him.
have to trade part of Madison Square Garden to get him.
Yes. And I love Giannis. He's a great player, but as of right now, the Bucks will be in. And it's not like the Bucks have a ton of future first round picks. And right now, I guess they're going to continue to stay with him, but I don't think a trade's realistic. That's my summation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, as far as KD, I'm out on KD. Giannis thing, the Knicks have the pieces for Giannis as far as like Towns and either OG or Mikal Bridges. They just don't have the assets as far as draft picks and stuff like that. It's the same thing like the Luca trade for Anthony Davis, because if Anthony Davis wasn't in that trade, they had to give up a whole bunch of first round picks, like 8 or 9 first round picks. So it just depends on the player you're trading back. Towns is still, I mean, he's a good player. He's an all-star. So I mean, it's not like you're trading for peanuts. You trade Giannis, you getting Towns and Bridges or Towns and OG and like, some rookies and stuff like that. So they can have the pieces. They just have to get a third or fourth team involved. That's it.
And to mention about Kevin Durant real quick, right now the Heat, the Rocket, and the Spurs are the preferences for Kevin Durant per Shams Charania. Coach also says the thing with Kid is he just can't quit. He can just quit. I don't know if he would still be under contract. If I could be wrong, if he quit. I mean, if he quit and went to the Knicks, that would be very interesting. The Knicks should also go after Dyson Daniels, secondary ball handler. The problem is he's not a great shooter. If you want to go 5 out, he's an awesome defender. He's a really good passer too, but he's also Brunson is also his dad. So you would have Brunson and Brunson's son on the team because he cooked Dyson Daniels in the regular season. If you look at the
Hawks,
you look at all those Knicks Hawks matchups, regardless,
that's true. But he's incredible.
It's true. It's true.
Great steals.
I'm gonna go around. This is a part of our final thoughts. I was originally gonna go into like free agents, but we've already been out here 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Give me one free agent you would sign or one player you would trade for as a Knick, filling your need or in core need that you think the Knicks have right now. And what would you consider the offseason? How would you consider the offseason to be a success? What's a failure? So, Donald, I'll start. What would you consider the offseason to be a success? What would you consider to be a failure? And what is one free agent or player you would like to target? There's also a trade market, too.
I mean, the free agent class is very weak, and we don't have anything other than exceptions. So Gary Trent Jr. would be someone that I would target. I've seen his name linked with the Knicks. I think that's someone that you can make use of. He can shoot and play a little defense too. He's one of those kind of microwave scorers. I think that he would be useful in the Garden. I think he'd rise to the occasion as well. So I would target him. And I would be looking to trade Mikal Bridges. That would be my ideal offseason if I could trade Mikal Bridges. I do want to see what we could do with a coach with Karl Anthony Towns and Brunson. Give it 1 year, 1 more year. And if it doesn't work, then move on with Towns. I want to see, because Towns did have a very good all-NBA year. But I'm trading Mikal Bridges. He's extension eligible. If we extend him, we're cooked. So I think if we could get a couple of really good role players for him and try and get a draft asset back in return, I would be running away with that if we could. I've heard, for instance, Walker Kessler would be someone that would be a very good pick to get center.
Yeah.
If you go maybe trade Bridges for Walker Kessler, another high impact player,
Colin Sexton,
plus a first round. Yeah, why not? And then a first round draft pick. I would make that trade. I think that would be a smart trade, because then you're building up the depth, bringing in some defense, bringing in some rim protection. Pair him with Mitchell Robinson as a kind of a rotate them situation. That would be kind of badass. But we do need some more floor spacing as well, and we need a secondary ball handler. I would love to get a first round pick for this draft, because there's some
Mhm.
talent in this draft. There's tons of talent in this draft. I would love to try and trade into like the lower part of the first round, um, and see if we can maybe get an athletic player that's a secondary ball handler. Some real talent in that draft. I've been doing some draft work. There's some nice players in there, but maybe that's for another podcast.
Absolutely. Donald laid it out nicely. I must say, Donald, because I wrote this down prior, Gary Trent was only on a 1-year contract for $2 million this year. So, and he shot 41% from three in the regular season, 41% from downtown on 6 attempts. Knicks do have access to that mid-level exception, though. Taxpayer mid-level exception. Let me see how much it's worth this year, just for reference. Mid-level exception 2025. All right, mid-level. Let's see projections. Taxpayer mid-level exception about $5.6 million. Not a lot. $5 to $6 million you're looking at, which is an upgrade from what Trent was earning this past
season. Am I right that if we used all of it, that would takes us into the second apron?
I have my notes on this. I'm going to pull that up.
I think I heard that.
You could be right on that. It would take us into the second apron, which I also, when I talked about Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride, if you want to offload those contracts and maybe then sign the mid-level exception player, that could ease the pressure off getting to the second apron. So the taxpayer mid-level exception, and just right now, just for the record, what the Knicks cannot do, they cannot use their biannual exception. Non-taxpayer mid-level exception they cannot use. They cannot use their Jericho Sims trade exception. They cannot acquire a free agent via sign and trade. They cannot go above the second apron as of right now. Obviously, they're in between first and second, so it's tight. But a Gary Trent Jr. addition is not impossible with the mid-level exception Knicks have in terms of money. But Dylan, you know what? Real quick before I go to Dylan, I see some comments. The official payback. What's up? Salute to all. I would love to see us move Mitch and get Clint Capella and Duncan Robinson with a vet like Al Horford as well. I think that's enough to get past Pacers and OKC. I would also consider D'Angelo Russell. Mitch is a free agent after the season. If we don't trade him, we lose him for nothing. That was what me and Dylan were talking about during the whole Mitchell Robinson. Not dismissing his impact, but in terms of health and all of that, unless he signs Mitch season, which I doubt, they can if we drop Mitch. But D'Angelo Russell's a very interesting target. Let me see if pretty sure he's a free agent this offseason. He was in Brooklyn. I think he'd be a very good backup point guard. But Dylan, I want to hear your thoughts. What's a successful offseason? What's a failure? And give me one acquisition you'd like the Knicks to make.
Yeah, so successful offseason. I don't think they have to make massive changes to the roster. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think they really can just go after depth pieces. I even posted some targets on the Fireside Knicks Instagram page, so if you didn't see that, make sure you check that out. But I posted some targets earlier today. I mentioned names like Gary Trent Jr. was one of them. I mentioned even like Luke Cornett, Karis LeVert is a free agent. Gary Payton II is a free agent. Malik Beasley's also a free agent. Now, I don't think he's realistic, but he is a free agent, though. So it's, worth exploring, see what you could possibly get. But he's probably going to get paid, so that's probably not very realistic. But either way, I think if you just add some bench depth, a guy like Gary Trent or even Gary Payton II, somebody like that, I feel like that's a stepping stone. If you can sign someone like that in free agency and then possibly make a trade for more depth. I know like Kobe White is out there as someone you could trade target. Even like Buddy Hield or Moses Moody as well. Those two guys in Golden State. Those are two guys you can target as well. There's a number of options, but as Donald said, the free agency class kind of sucks this year. So, it's not like there's no big name out there in free agency. So if they just add depth, then I consider it a success. I don't think they have to make mind-blowing moves like they did last summer to really take that step forward. So.
Absolutely. Man Cave.
Yeah, man. Season's already been a success with firing Tom Thibodeau, so that's one good thing. Got a new coach coming in with a new concept, new idea, fresh voice. That's one thing. As far as guys I would like to have, like you said, it's not realistic, but a couple of guys, Malik Beasley would be my number one. As a shooter, to be a starter. To put Josh Hart on the bench.
Mhm.
You know, we need snipers in our starting lineups. Malik Beasley will be nice. Gary Trent will be nice. As far as our backup point guard, I like Tyus Jones, strong ball handler. We need a guy that can handle the rock. Cameron Payne cannot handle the rock. Deuce McBride cannot handle the rock under pressure to playoffs. Tyus Jones is a great ball handler. We need strong ball handlers, guys who can handle the rock to back and to run a team, because Tyus Jones could run a team off the bench like he did for Memphis with Ja Morant out. He led that team, you know what I'm saying? So we need somebody like that who's proven. Dennis Schroeder is another player that could come in for dead pieces or something like that. So those are nice. Walker Kessler, I mean, he's only making $4-7 million. I mean, I think the last time they won like a first-round pick or 2 first-round pick or something like that. But, you know, he could be part of some like 3-4 team deals or something like that. If we get Walker Kessler, that would be great too. For depth, he just in case if Mitchell Robinson gets traded or whatever, you know, that'll be great. So I think that'll be it.
Absolutely. Great thoughts by everyone. Official Payback says, I think Luke wants to come home, as in Luke Cornett. Potentially a big man option. The Knicks do need a backup big man. Obviously, if they want to have Mitchell Robinson at the starting 5 position. I'm going to look up some stats real quick before I get to my final thoughts in terms of that. He's from Westchester. Duncan Robinson is the greatest pickup we can possibly get. He would be a scorer and playmaker that can give us offense off the bench and a great three-point threat. So Robinson, for reference, 11 points. He started 37 games, which was actually half the games he played. 39% from downtown on nearly 7 attempts per game. Shot 43% from the field. That would be a good option in terms of
we can't afford him though.
That's true. He's on a hefty contract.
He got a team option coming up this year at $19 million. He's going to pick that $19 million up, so we don't have $19 million.
That's true. And
Pat
Riley,
unless we traded away like 3 important rotation pieces, there was no way we'd be able to get him.
Right.
And for what it's worth, I am not trading 3 core rotation pieces for Duncan Robinson. I'm sorry.
Right, who lost his starting position or whatever coming off the bench.
Right. I'm not
that was a bad contract.
Yeah, he's got an early termination option, but that's different. But regardless, we need to get rid of all 6'2" guards away from Brunson. So I'm going to throw a couple names just for Spitfire. I've seen Knicks fans mention the likes of Lonzo Ball. Yes, he has injury issues, but he would be a great fit, if healthy, alongside Jalen Brunson in the starting lineup. Great playmaking, great defense, perimeter shooting, secondary ball handler. That's an option. I brought up with Donald. We were talking about the Jazz. Colin Sexton is an option. Unfortunately, as I said, Steven Adams just re-signed with the Rockets, so
he's gone.
He's gone. Malcolm Brogdon, who recently
nice.
just played with the Wizards, he would be a nice backup point guard. Man Cave, I know you mentioned Tyus Jones, especially maybe even if the Knicks hire Tyler Jenkins. Chris Paul on a possible minimum contract or a max taxpayer mid-level exception, possibly. Again, not as a starter, as a backup.
No, I mean, I can maybe see that, actually.
But I got to tell you, he does like warm weather. He's not, as you look throughout his career, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Houston, Golden State, and San Antonio. He's very much a Western guy, so it'll be hard to get him. But again, connection with Leon Rose.
I would love to see like an unbelievable creative point guard just putting these beautiful passes. That would be nice. Like
he's a player, and he's also a really good leader and a coach. Trey Murphy, Dill mentioned Kobe White, also Gary Trent Jr., as Donald mentioned, as well as a shooter off the bench. But those are some names. Nothing particular.
Here's another one. The Celtics are looking to cut payroll. Jaylen Brown. Shams says that the Celtics would listen.
Jaylen Brown's making like the richest.
He's making
$60 million. He's making $60 million.
Bro, I love Jaylen Brown. If you want someone to work great beside Jalen Brunson, Jaylen Brown.
It would cost a lot of assets on our team to even think about getting.
I thought he was gonna say Sam Hauser, free agent off the bench. Sam Hauser.
That would be a good option. Don't get me wrong, I think Jaylen Brown's a good player, but it would cost way too much to get him. And with all these CBA rules and stuff, it's like impossible.
Plus, also as well, the Celtics, why would not the divisions matter, but like, why would they want to trade with the Knicks? That's just my personal opinion. Also, here's the thing, Donald, if you want a ball handler next to, I nearly said Holiday, Brunson, I don't know how much money he's making. I'm looking up right now. If the Celtics were to trade with the Knicks, I would target Drew Holiday.
He is available. He's
they
been linked with the Kings.
That makes
Drew
sense.
Holiday's on the Celtics.
Yeah, I'm saying in the scenario that the Celtics would be willing to trade, which is very unlikely. Also, another name, again, unlikely, Derek White, because they're looking to move off him apparently.
They would trade him too.
Yeah, he's making 28, 30, 32, Derek White. Yeah, that's a lot of money, man.
It's a lot of money. Indeed.
Drew Holiday, 32, 34, 37 coming up. Yeah, that's a lot of money too. So you got to give up.
Yeah, we were spitballing some names to the Celtics. Most likely not realistic, but fun to spitball. If we trade Mitch, that makes he makes Civis. I think it's like $15 to $17 million a year. Hopefully, my dreams come true. I want Jason Kidd so badly now. Nimar and Donald are on the Jason Kidd train. Maybe I'll be convinced.
I am on the Kidd train. I think it'd be ideal.
Yeah, obviously his connection with Brunson, all that, but if you guys don't have anything else to add, I think we'll close up here. 2 hours, 20 minutes of Knicks basketball talk for the upcoming offseason. Must I say real quick, if you guys haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when I go live or drop a new video. Plenty of offseason content to come. But before all of that, check the links in the description. Fireside Knicks, Dylan's X, Donald, Pinstripe Chronicles, Man Cave, his channel in the description. I wouldn't have done this show without these three. I must say, great analysis from each and every person, different perspectives. Much appreciated. Again, once again, thank you to the chat. Thank you to my fellow co-hosts. Great job, great analysis. Idea is we're going to get better in the offseason. We're going to hire a good coach, and let's go Knicks.
Let's go Knicks.
Peace out, y'all.
Always.
Have a good night. Enjoy your Father's Day, everybody, too. Enjoy your Father's Day.